we'll get started here. So we've started the recording. We have now going to go back here to sharing my slides and we'll get started. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Again, I'd just like to welcome everyone here to our meeting this evening for the Fairfax County Site-Specific Plan Amendment process. Tonight's focus is going to be on the Fairfax Center area portion of the county. We've got several nominations to get through this evening, so we'll present those, as well as some background on comprehensive plan and some additional information on the project as a whole. Before we get started, just some housekeeping items here. Tonight's meeting is being recorded, and so we would kindly request that for everyone to please remain muted until called on to speak. After each part of the presentation, we'll pause to answer any questions or comments, but also we'll stay on at the end of the conversation to have some additional dialogue with you once the presentation is completed. If you do need to speak at any time, we would please ask that you, number one, this is a public forum, so we would ask that you please be civil and you be respectful of everyone's opinions here on the call. I shouldn't have to say this, of course, but any type of disruptive or abusive behavior or things like that won't be tolerated. We're going to treat each other with respect as though we were in a public meeting in person. And so when we do get to the opportunity to speak and open it up for dialogue, we would ask that if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. There's a button on the bottom. This will let our meeting host know that you do wish to speak. We do have 2 nominations this evening, and so we just want to make sure that we are able to get through everything. When you do have comments, we would ask that you please be brief, about 2 minutes or so at the maximum. Allow everyone the opportunity to speak, and then if there's additional questions or comments, we can please refrain from having that conversation until the end. We just want to make sure that we are respectful of everyone's time. We know that some may need to leave early, or that others want to wrap this up by 9 o'clock, which is our stated end time. Of course, if we go beyond that and we're having a discussion, we're happy to stay on to assist those who want to continue the dialogue. I will note that we also have a chat box here in Zoom for those of you familiar with the function. If you're not comfortable in speaking in person, or you've got something that you would like to put down in writing, please share that in the chat box. Staff will answer it there. We will be monitoring that so we can have that dialogue as well. All of this will be available at the end of the meeting with the recording. We'll have the chat available as well. I've already gotten one question here. Will you provide a roll call for those who are attending the meeting and send out meeting minutes after the meeting? We will have available a recording on the website. We'll have the chat dialogue. We'll have a meeting summary. We won't necessarily have a roll call per se. I'm not sure that that's a feature of the meeting summary, but certainly anyone who's participated in the chat or has spoken up and given comments, their name will be part of the public record. And finally, if you're like me at all, you'll know that you'll remember a question or something right after this call ends. If that's the case, we're always available over email. Feel free to email us, dpd/sspa@fairfaxcounty.gov, and we will ensure that we get back to you just as soon as possible. And so I do want to iterate that this is just a initial step of this process. There will be many opportunities to contribute to the site-specific process, as well as any plan amendments that move forward. And so certainly this is the first of many opportunities for the public to be engaged in the process. And I'll discuss that here. So by way of an agenda this evening, we'll do some introductions. Again, I'm Ryan Stewart with the county. With me this evening, I see on the call, we've got Supervisor Walkinshaw of the Braddock District. We've got Commissioner Mary Cortina, Planning Commissioner of the Braddock District. I believe we've got Planning Commissioner Spain on the call as well. And we've got some other county officials. We've got my colleagues, Graham Owen, Mike Linsky, and Katrina Knutson. They'll all be helping me present and moderate this evening. And at this time, I'd like to just go ahead and open it up, see if Supervisor Walkinshaw, did you have any opening comments that you'd like to share?
Thank you, Ryan. I just wanted to thank you all, and especially all the members of the community who joined tonight. This is a really important, as you noted, early step in the SSPA process, a process which, gives us the opportunity in an orderly way and in a way that provides for significant community engagement and feedback to consider changes to the comprehensive plan. So I'm thrilled that so many folks are joining us here tonight for the beginning of this process to help us shape it moving forward. So look forward to the presentations and the questions and feedback from the community. Thank you, Ryan.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I see a comment here in the chat that I'll go ahead and address right now. We will maybe need it later. There are some versions of Zoom where you need to click react first, which is a heart emoji. That'll be at the bottom of the screen, and there'll be an option to raise your hand if you wish to speak. So if that applies to you, just know that you may need to look under that react emoji to raise your hand to ask to speak. So this evening, I'll go over some background on the process. We'll go over kind of a little bit of why we're here this evening, talk about the comprehensive plan, develop sort of a common vocabulary that we can talk about some planning issues, and then talk about kind of what we are looking to accomplish in the screening process and the next steps. And then we'll go into the details of the two nominations that we're covering this evening. We've got one nomination for a potential expansion of the StorageMart at the intersection of Route 29 and Shirley Gate, and we've got another proposal for some independent living facilities at 12716 Route 29, and we'll cover those here in the meeting. But just to get started here, I wanted to go ahead and start with an overview of the process. And I apologize in advance if I do a lot of talking, but we will pause here shortly for some questions and comments. The countywide SSPA process provides an opportunity for property owners and other members of the public to propose land use changes as nominations to amend the comprehensive plan. These could be for a single site or a collection of parcels, but generally a small area. The goal of the SSPA process is to provide the community with an active role in shaping the long-term vision of Fairfax County's land use policies. Some of you may be familiar with a process that we've done in the past called Area Plans Review, or APR. This was a process that has been superseded by the current SSPA process, but please know that the intent and the goal is the same. It's a process by which to amend the comprehensive plan that is a community-driven nomination effort. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to provide the community with information about the process, and then to invite some public comments on the specific nominations that that have been submitted here in the Braddock District and in the Springfield District and the Fairfax Center area. But so it's very important to note that no decisions will be made this evening. The purpose here is mainly to help staff and the county decide on what we should be working on, rather than making decisions on what particular plan amendments should be approved or disapproved. That comes at a much later step of the process. But before we dive into the process itself, I'd just like to make sure that everyone's familiar with the comprehensive plan and has an understanding of the ways that it helps to shape development here in Fairfax County. Land development is complex here in the county, and you can see here in this graphic the many steps that are covered here. Kind of starts off at the top here in yellow when someone might have a concept of what to do with a particular piece of property. If it's not something that's already allowed for or recommended in the comprehensive plan, it may need to go through a comprehensive plan amendment and then a potential zoning or an entitlement to actually obtain the permissions in order to develop the property in that way. And then from there, it goes through a design phase, where we're designing the construction elements, basically the plans for how to construct the site, permitting, and then construction of the site itself, and then occupancy, which is the throughout the life cycle of the building, how that property is used on a day-to-day basis. There comes a time when a property is no longer viable, and so it would need to be renewed, either through a redevelopment of the site or a reuse of the building. And then we're back in the concept phase again, and so the cycle begins all over. But the SSPA process is right at the very beginning of this process. It's a conceptual process, and so what we're doing here again is looking at nominations from the community, and the community can help us decide which of those nominations has further merit to that may warrant a future plan amendment. That would be the very first step of the process here. It's a very high level overview at this. Now, the comprehensive plan, or we'll call it the plan, it's a document that's used to guide Fairfax County's decision makers in issues such as land use and conservation of natural resources. And it's really got a long-term vision. It's generally about a 20 to 30-year time horizon. And so we're not looking at things that might impact kind of where we're going to, like immediately tomorrow, next week, this year. We're looking at really what is the long-term vision for the county. And it's important to note that the plan is not law like the zoning ordinance, but instead it provides land use recommendations. And it really serves as a living document that should be evaluated and reevaluated over time to ensure that its recommendations continue to meet the needs of the community and to reflect the values, visions, and goals of the public. And as significant changes occur, that may be an option for us to look at the plan and determine whether or not an amendment is needed. The SSPA is just one of the ways that the plan can be amended. As I mentioned, it's a community-driven process by nominations, but also the Board of Supervisors is able to authorize amendments. And there are several other ways in which the plan can be amended. But generally, it requires an authorization from the Board of Supervisors before any plan amendment would be not only undertaken, but what is ultimately adopted into the plan, that would be the purview of the board. Now, a key part of the comprehensive plan is our concept for future development. And you can see on this map, we've got a map of the county. It's got several different colors here. You can see some black, some purple, some red, some tan, and even some silver here. These are what's known as our activity center. And a key part of the history of planning in Fairfax County is that these activity centers are designed and planned in a way that new development should be directed to these areas. And so places such as Tyson's, Reston, our suburban centers, these are really where we see the majority of new development in the county. It's generally of a mixed use character. And so the idea here is that people would be able to live, work, and play kind of within proximity to their homes. And it's a way that has been a very successful, I should say, method of controlling growth and development within the county. And so it's one way that the county uses its tool where we look at how we can best economically propel the county forward, preserve the resources where they are, and provide for some certain protections against suburban sprawl, as we've seen in other areas. Now, some terms that are used in comprehensive planning, and you'll see these tonight, we've got several different things in terms of how we talk about how much development. We've got density, intensity, and FAR, known as floor to area ratio. You can kind of see here, this is a plan here of the Fairfax Center area core on this particular slide. And what is in red is the highest level of intensity around Fair Oaks Mall, the government center, Fairfax Corner, and things like that. But then you see as the core, farther out, you see some lower density neighborhood developments. You see some townhomes, some single family homes. And so just as an example of what intensity might look like in an area, you generally see it concentrated in areas where we might consider a core area or places where that higher intensity is planned. Now, in terms of residential, we tend to look at things in terms of dwelling units per acre. And this is a measurement. You can see here kind of different styles of residential development along the spectrum. At the low end, we've got our single family detached homes. That's generally at 1 to 2 or 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. Townhomes, or we may refer to those as single family attached. Those can normally range between 8 to 12 and 12 to 16 dwelling units per acre. And then at the higher end, we've got multifamily apartment buildings and condominiums. And these can range in terms of 16 dwelling units per acre or more. And so you can kind of get a sense here, if you imagine where your neighborhood is and the style of house that you live in, you can kind of see where this falls in the spectrum of development in Fairfax County and how that's classified, whether that's a low or medium or a high level of residential density. And then when we look at mixed use development that includes not only residential, but also commercial or retail or other uses within the same development, we use what's called floor to area ratio as a measure of intensity. And what this is essentially a formula where we describe the amount of developed floor area to the size of the land area. And so you can see there's several configurations. You can kind of think of these as Legos, for example, or building blocks, where a FAR of 1.0 would be equal to the land area. And then you can get additional configurations of open space by building up. And so in this graphic, you can see that all of these represent a 1.0 FAR, but it's different configurations. And so you may have a 1.0 FAR that covers a quarter of the site, but it's 4 stories tall, for example. So you can imagine that the configurations here are essentially, endless in terms of creativity, but the zoning ordinance and the site conditions and other regulations will inform the form and the style of development. And so we may see things like building height restrictions or setbacks from property lines or other open space requirements that may inform the style of development that takes a certain configuration using FAR method. But just to give you an idea, when we talk about FAR, we're really looking at mixed-use developments and how those different configurations can be accomplished. So as I mentioned earlier, talking about the screening process here, it's really at the very beginning of the development cycle. And you can kind of see down here on the bottom of the slide, we've got the screening process, but then we've also got the comprehensive plan amendment process, which amends the plan itself. The screening process is really to determine, what projects have the highest public benefit of in terms of the project itself. So we're looking at things like the value of the project to the county, the success of that project, and kind of how it aligns with the board's goals and other strategic priorities. This is something that is very community and publicly driven, which is why we're having meetings this evening. We'll have tonight the series of public meetings. We'll have some workshops with the Planning Commission coming up here in a month or so, and then we'll have public hearings with the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. And I'll talk more about that, in the process here. But ultimately, the goal here is to add items onto our county's work plan for plan amendments, which is basically a document that directs where the county should be focusing their efforts on long-range planning and development. Again, it's not something that provides for amending the plan or provides for any type of permissions for development. It's simply a tool that's used to help us strategically plan our workload at the county level. So some of the considerations that go into this process as we're reviewing individual nominations. First of all is, does a nomination address emerging community interests? Are there particular things that the community wants to see out of the plan that may not currently be addressed, or it may warrant a nomination? Does the nomination advance certain objectives of the county's comprehensive plan that are already in county-wide policy or in the concept of future development? So how well does the individual site plan fit with the overall county-wide land use goals? Does the nomination align with the goals of the board's adopted policies? And so for this, we look at not only the policies that are in the comprehensive plan, but we're also looking at the county-wide strategic plan, and we're looking at anything that may be of strategic value to the county on a policy level. That may be something in terms of, say, natural resource protection. It may be the affordable housing. It may be economic development. It may be transportation. Any number of the county's priorities we evaluate against these individual nominations to see how well they align. Looking at the balance between the public resources versus public benefit. Essentially, what is the benefit of the county to undertake the SSPA process, knowing that it can be several months in length, and it can be a process that takes some significant level of study and resources and things of that matter. So looking at this from a lens of government responsibility, how well these projects align with the use of resources. And then also, is the current use that's currently in the comprehensive plan, is this a viable thing? Is there a justified reason for amending the plan where equally viable options might exist? And so we look at how well each nomination aligns to the comprehensive plan currently. And just to give you an idea of the screening timeline here, you'll see that we've had our nomination period where nominations were submitted back in February or January, February. We had a board action to accept the nominations in March. What accepting the nominations mean is simply the board has agreed that the nominations that have been submitted meet the basic criteria for submittal. You know, it's got a statement of justification. It's got a basic plan or concept of some sort, and there's enough information that staff has to be able to run the screening process on those nominations. And you'll see not every nomination made it through that initial action. There's about 10 or so that did not, and so we do have a batch that will be going through the screening process now. Part of this is conducting these community meetings, which we're doing today, and we'll continue to do this. But through late March and mid-April, this is really where we have an opportunity for the initial community engagement on the process. And then in early May and June, or I should say May and early June, we'll have planning commission workshops where the planning commission will really evaluate each of these nominations, come up with an ultimate plan of what they think the work plan should look like, whether that's a list of nominations that should be accepted onto the work plan, those that should not be accepted, and then also a priority ranking of how those nominations would fall on the work plan. So essentially, what are the highest value of projects that should move forward? And then in June, we'll have an action on the work plan itself. And this is really officially where the work plan is adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Again, it's not an acknowledgement that any of these plan amendments should ultimately be recommended for acceptance and changing the comprehensive plan, but it is a direction to staff on where to focus their resources in terms of the overall comprehensive planning effort. So if a nomination passes screening, what happens? Well, as I mentioned, it's added on to the plan amendment work program, which is essentially a direction to staff to study a particular nomination further. It's a prioritized effort, and so the work program is essentially a prioritized list of projects that are in our pipeline. And then once resources are available, depending on the priority, staff will schedule the review of the proposal and then start the actual plan amendment process, which is a community-driven process that really does the high-level analysis, the community outreach, and then makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors whether or not to amend the plan according to that analysis. If a nomination does not pass screening, it's basically not added to the work program, but it may not be gone either. Now, there's always the possibility that nominations can come back, maybe in the same form, maybe in a different form, in a later SSPA cycle, which we conduct these about every 2 years. And so, it's not a hard pass to say that a property may never be developed. It could certainly still be developed in line with the current comprehensive plan or its current zoning, but it's an opportunity for nominators, if they wish to resubmit, they would need to resubmit in the next cycle. So let's look at 2025 and kind of where we're headed in today's current nomination cycle. Overall, countywide, we received 53 total nominations. And as I mentioned, some of them did not make it into the acceptance phase for various reasons, but 43 of these have been accepted into the screening process by the board. And you can kind of get a geographical view of where these are in the county. Where we're focused on this evening is just to the center west of the county in what's on the map there as kind of where it's labeled Fair Oaks. You can see what looks like the outline of the city of Fairfax immediately to the east, but this is what's called the Fairfax Center area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that area here very shortly. And so we look at the actual the screening and kind of where we are today in the process. Here in the Fairfax Center area, and you can see the outline here, we're bounded by roughly just south of 29 to the south. We've got Route 50 to the north, and the area is bisected by Route 66. We've got the Fair Oaks Mall, we've got the Government Center, the Fairfax Corner Shopping Center, Fair Lakes, a portion of Fair Oaks there, and it borders the city of Fairfax to the east. So kind of giving a geographical overview here of where we are in the county to focus everyone. The concept for future development for Fairfax Center is you can kind of think of this as maybe like an onion, for example. we've got the highest level of intensity. And then I showed you that slide earlier where we have the core area here in the dark pink. That's around the government center. That's Fairfax Mall. That's Fairfax Corner, and the neighborhoods and commercial and retail areas in this center. And then farther out, we've got what's known as suburban neighborhoods. Suburban neighborhoods are really those areas where they're primarily a range of residential uses and neighborhood supporting commercial uses around in the main portion of what we call the suburban center. But there can be a wide variety of uses there. And then on the periphery, we've got what we call suburban neighborhoods here in the yellow. And these are also more of a lower density residential character, but then they may also have some supporting commercial uses, some retail uses and things to really have a supplementary effect to the residences, but they're typically a lower intensity than the surrounding areas. And I want to highlight this evening because both of our nominations tonight are within these suburban neighborhood areas. And so right now, before we get into the nominations themselves, I'm going to pause here, and I'd like to go ahead and open it up to any questions that we have about process, timeline, or anything along those lines, anything I've covered so far. I want to hold off on individual nomination comments just yet because we'll get to that shortly. But if anyone has questions on the process or anything that you've seen, we would ask that you please raise your hand, and we will call on you to comment. Again, just given the number of people on the call and the material tonight, we would ask that you please keep your comments brief to allow everyone to participate. And so do I see that we have any hands raised? I don't see anything quite yet, but I am seeing a few comments here in the chat.
Because you don't let us speak.
Hi, Aref, did you have a question?
Hands of it. If they let me speak, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, yes.
If they let me speak, I think everybody's question will be answered.
Okay, do you have a process question, or how can I help you?
How much time do I have?
If we can keep it as brief as possible. We've got other people that want to comment, and I want to make sure that we get to everyone in our time limit.
All right. We all know the history. You and I know it more than everybody else here. And I've owned that lot next to them for now 28 years, 29 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to show
Hey,
how
Ref,
it was.
Hey, Ref, I'm going to ask you right now, if this is on the StorageMart, what we'll do is if we can hold off on those comments until we get to the StorageMart nomination, let's focus right now on any process questions. I want to make sure we get through this portion of the conversation before we delve into the details of the individual nominations. Is that okay?
Which this is first on my Zoom, so I'm not good at it. Second, what are we talking about? Are you talking about the independent living, or are we talking? This is about the StorageMart.
No, well, right now we're talking about the process of the.
We heard about Tyson.
Right now we're talking about the SSPA process, and for that I want to make sure that we answer any questions on material that we've already covered. We'll get to the nominations themselves shortly.
Looks like
in that case, if it's not a process question, we'll go ahead and move on. But we've got some other questions here in the chat.
Justin had a question.
Yes, Graham. Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It looks like Justin has a question.
Okay, great. Hi, Justin. How are you?
Good. Thank you for that presentation. It was very helpful and answered some questions. I do have two additional questions, though, about the process, which is, at what point in the process is the actual wording of a plan amendment drafted? Is one question. And then the second question is that necessarily at the density that's requested in the proposal, or might that change through this whole process?
So, Justin, if you can see my screen here, I put up the process slide that I presented earlier. Where we get to a point where we're actually looking at plan text is in this green area here down at comprehensive plan amendment process. We're looking at really where we have analysis and engagement. And then before this goes to the Planning Commission, the staff will develop a, in collaboration with the community and based on the analysis that's conducted, we'll provide a recommendation of suggested plan text for the Planning Commission to consider. From there, the Planning Commission may have some edits to that. and they may come up with their own version. And so it's a very iterative process. And then when it gets to the Board of Supervisors, they may have some edits to that as well. So ultimately, we get to the details of a plan language, intensity, development, all of those kind of those site level details after this would be put on work program and after it passes the screening process and it's much further on down the line from where we are right now.
Great, much appreciated.
Great, thank you. I see, David, you've got your hand up?
Yes, Ryan, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, David. How can I help you?
Great, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your presentation, and I'll be brief. If you can stay on this slide, that'll be super helpful. Just a quick
Sure, of
question
course.
on the nomination period that I'm looking at on the bottom left from January to February of 2025. Is that a portion of time when public is allowed to comment and be a part of that process?
Sure. So that was the time that initially, when we had that process, that was just basically an open period for anyone who wanted to submit a nomination to do that. And so, in terms of public comment, this is really the first opportunity that we've had to conduct that public comment period. And so, don't worry, you haven't missed anything yet. We've gone through a process where we've looked at the nominations. We've kind of done some initial analysis to be able to share with the public, but now we're at a point where we have this series of meetings to be able to share the details of these nominations with everyone.
Okay, so this is the first time for public.
Yes,
this is the first chance for public comment. Okay,
yeah, and don't worry, you haven't missed anything. All of the nomination materials are available through our Plus system, so everything's publicly available. You're welcome to peruse those documents. But this is the first chance that the public has really been in a forum where we can engage on the individual nominations.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Yep. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Actually, I see one. Got a Emerin. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name there, but I see you have your hand up.
Yes, you pronounced it correctly. Thank you for taking my question. Will we get more prior notice when things are happening or when we can speak? Unfortunately, this afternoon was the first time I actually heard about this, and I apologize for coming in later if this was already spoken about.
Sure. No, I'm saying it's not, but I do plan on covering it later in the presentation. I appreciate you bringing this up. If we go to the SSPA website, I'm going to ask one of my colleagues here to put the URL in the chat. There's an option there to sign up to be notified for any future developments as they occur. We've got a whole listing of our community engagement. Once we've set the agendas for the Planning Commission workshops, those will be available online as well. And so those are opportunities to engage. Essentially, every one of these boxes at the bottom of the slide, with the exception of maybe the first and the second, are really options for the community to engage in the process. And so you'll see, throughout the SSPA process, we've got the community meetings tonight. We've got the Planning Commission workshops coming up, and we've got the hearings with the Planning Commission and the board coming up this summer. And then for those that get into the plan amendment process itself, you'll see a whole host of community meetings, opportunities to participate on the draft plan text, ask about the analyses, go to public hearings with the Planning Commission and board. And so, again, this is really just the start of the process. But for those that want to really be engaged in it, I'd encourage you to sign up for the mailing list. If you cannot find that link on the website, I'd be happy to add you directly, and I'll have my contact information after this. And so you can do that as well. But please stay involved. There's plenty of ways to do that.
Yes, I would love to be more involved and be more notified. Thank you.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Aref, I see you've got the next person in the queue here. Did you have a process question or?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, I am. I see you're next in line with your hand up.
Yeah, I'm online. Are we on StorageMart?
No. We're still on process right now. We're going to be storage will be the first nomination we discuss, but we'll have that conversation after this.
After what?
After the process discussion.
We all know what the process is. Somebody want to change a comprehensive plan,
Yeah, well, there's still some questions on the process, but Don't worry, sir. We'll get to
the
your questions on
process
the
is
storage.
simple. The guy wants to take Fairfax County for a ride. That's
Sir,
simple.
we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'd ask you to please, yield the
And I
floor here,
give
and we
you
can let some others
evidence
ask
and all
questions.
documentation, everything that what they're
Okay.
doing is completely illegal, in my opinion. I'm
Okay.
not a land lawyer,
All right, thank you,
but
sir.
in my
We'll get to you
opinion, as a
shortly. Okay,
retired
thank you.
businessman.
All right, so we've got a few questions here in the chat in terms of does the process include consideration of people living in the surrounding areas? And I would say, with that, absolutely. We've already done a round of notifications to the surrounding HOAs and the surrounding residents, community associations where we have that information. But certainly with this being at the beginning of the process, if you know of someone that should be involved that has not yet been involved, please let us know and we'll be sure to add them. But we really want to make sure that we do hear from the surrounding communities. These are the folks that are going to be ultimately most impacted by this, by these nominations. And so we want to make sure that we get the community feedback correct and that we understand the community's view on these. So that's a great question. And I see, Christopher, you've got a question here in the chat. You have a follow-up text questions to the ones that Michael responded to already. If you'd like to go ahead and put those in the chat, we'd be happy to talk about them.
I did already,
and
we'll,
once you've done that, we'll go ahead and get back to it. Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Christopher. We'll see here. These are StorageMart questions. If you don't mind, I'd like to come back to these because I want to make sure that we talk about StorageMart all in one go. Hi, Simon. I see you've got your hand up here in the chat.
Hi, this is actually Sandra. I have a question.
Hi, Sandra.
Nice to speak with you again. I have a question. How do you notify constituents about what's the process to notify constituents? I ask because I share a property line with one of the nominations in question, and I'm the past president of the HOA. And neither myself, the 4 neighbors that border the property, or the HOA received notification.
Okay, well, I apologize for that. First of all, it could be that our records are just incorrect, and we'll need to make that adjustment going forward. So first, I want to thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's certainly not the intent to exclude anyone in the notifications, but typically we'll do a notification to the surrounding property owners of the nomination, and the size of that radius really depends on the size of the nomination and what's being proposed and where we think those initial impacts might be. We also make notification to the surrounding homeowners associations where we have that information, as well as mailings to any community groups or anyone that we know of operating in the area. In addition to all of this, we've also done publications through our listserv, which is an email notification service on comprehensive planning issues. We post to social media. We mainly do Facebook and Nextdoor. We've had the best success with those. And then also any type of supervisor newsletters that we might have that communicate with individual supervisors, constituents. And so essentially we use every avenue that we can to get out to the public. And I recognize it's not a perfect process and we don't reach everyone in the way that we would like to. And there's always ways for improvement. But if you've got some contact information that you'd like us to use to contact you in the future, please reach out and we'll make sure that we have our records updated. And again, I apologize if that seemed like an oversight. That certainly wasn't the case.
Thank you.
And hi, I've got Mir. Your hands up. Hi, Mir. I see that you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Okay, well, maybe you can, if maybe we're having some audio issues, maybe we could put those comments in the chat, or we'll come back to you, and we'll make sure that we hear from you. Just looking at the chat now, I'm seeing some other comments here, and it's not an exhaustive list, but I'll try to address these. Buckley's Reserve HOA had no idea. Okay, well we will make sure that Buckley's Reserve HOA is on our list. It could be that we just may have an incorrect address, or it may not have been delivered correctly, but we'll make sure that you get proper notification for this. Do we have a date yet for the public workshop nominations? We do, and I'll be covering that in a future slide here. But these are going to be Planning Commission dates that are starting in May. And so for dates that are already on the calendar for the Planning Commission, we'll be putting these workshop items onto the agenda. Another question: what other SPAs have been approved previously? It really depends. We don't really have, I would say we don't have data that we really track to see what how many amendments are SSPAs versus other types of plan amendments. But generally speaking, every 2 years or so, we do kind of get a healthy refresh of our work plan and things to work for that come from SSPAs. And so it's a primary way in which we solicit nominations for the plan and carry out our planning processes. And so, I can't tell you whether that's half or 75%, but it's a good portion of the work that we do.
Hey, Ryan, this is Mir. Can you hear me now or no?
Hi, Mir. I can hear you. How can I help?
Hey, appreciate it. Quick process question.
Sure.
So somebody asked earlier that if this is the first opportunity for public comment, and you said yes. I just want to ask you, because similar to Sandra's question, and we're all part of the Berkeley's Reserve community, and we believe that our neighbor community, Willow Mead, they provided considerable feedback on this SSPA, and we just got in the loop recently. But the question is, have you incorporated their feedback? Wouldn't that require a resubmission from a process perspective?
So right now, where we are in the process is we're basically considering this as the very first time that we've heard from the community. We've already started to receive some email comments and some things from the public, but for the most part, we're not to the point yet where we are really analyzing the public comments just yet.
So Ryan,
that's really going
Mike.
to come into where we. Yeah, hi Mike. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so I'm sort of handling that nomination, which we'll hear about later. But I think that in that case, the nominator has already gone to some land use committee meetings and has interfaced with the public prior to the SSPA process about their proposal. So that was sort of outside of our process. So that's why you may have heard of it, or some folks may have heard of it before. But we're just now starting the plan amendment process. So this is the first step for us here. So
okay, yeah, that's great, Mike. I should have mentioned there are ways to for the nominators to go out to the public without the county, but certainly from the county's perspective, this is the first county event. I do want to be mindful of the time here, so we're going to move on to the nominations. And of course, after we get to the presentation here and the nominations, we'll be online after this. And so if anyone has any more process-related questions, we'll go ahead and address those then. I'm going to forward through my slides here, and we'll get to the nomination. The first one is actually, as I mentioned, it is going to be the StorageMart presentation. So StorageMart, this is a nomination at the intersection of Route 29 and Shirley Gate Road. You can see it here on the map, right there at the intersection. The site area is about 2.2 acres in total in the dotted line there. It's comprised of two separate parcels. One is currently developed as the self-storage industrial use, and then parcel 11 to the south is a vacant residential parcel. This is part of what we call subunit W2 in the Fairfax Center area plan. And the plan really calls for several different options for the site. We've got office or retail use at up to a 0.15 FAR. There's that measurement I mentioned earlier. A residential use at 1 dwelling unit per acre. So you can kind of get a sense of what either an office or a residential option might look like. We've also got options for an office use up to a 0.25 FAR, about 1/4, or retail use up to about 0.35, or residential use up to 3 dwelling units per acre. And that 3 dwelling units per acre, you can kind of see how some of the residential developments in the area are developed at that level. We do have specific plan text for parcel 52, the self-storage, to redevelop the existing use to office use at a 0.25. And so this site is particularly called out in the plan as having that office option. But the nomination that we're considering as part of this process is to add an option for the existing self-storage use on parcel 52 to be able to expand onto parcel 11. And I'll let the nominator here speak on this shortly because they'll provide the details. From some of the planning considerations that staff has been looking at so far with this expansion, and you can see what the concept may look like in this graphic. But we have some area-wide guidance at the Fairfax Center area level that applies to the entire Fairfax Center suburban area. That the existing spot commercial uses along Route 29 are, I'm quoting here, inconsistent with the long-term land use objectives for the Fairfax Center area and should not be expanded or enhanced. And so we would consider this to be one of those expansions. And so we would need to look at how well this aligns with the area-wide guidance. And then with the proposed intensity of the expansion, we recognize that the FAR could be as high as about a 1.1 FAR between the two parcels. What that means in terms of the overall intensity for the Fairfax Center area, we would have to look at how well that aligns to how other areas within the Fairfax Center are planned. But that is on one of the higher ends at that 1.1. The nominator's stated intent is that the scale, the massing, and the size of the building would be compatible with the existing self-storage and the surrounding residential homes. And so as part of this process, we would look at those compatibility issues. And then as just a policy matter, we note that expanding to the south would encourage some industrial encroachment into the existing suburban neighborhoods. And also this site is within the water supply protection overlay district. And so we've had that, it's kind of an environmental water quality concern as well. So those are just some things that are very high level for staff. But at this time, what I'll do is go ahead and turn it over to our nominator, who's got a presentation from their point of view. Ms. Taylor, are you on the phone?
Yes, good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I do represent the nominator. So the nominator of this SSPA nomination is the property owners of both parcels. You can see located at 11325 Route 29 and 4235 Shirley Gate Road. So if we can go to the first slide. Staff has already noted, the nomination property is improved with an existing two-story self-storage facility that was constructed back in 1990. And then you can also see it has associated surface parking. As I mentioned, the nominator is a family business, StorageMart, that began operating at this specific location since 2008. So for the past roughly 17 years, when they purchased this property, and they actually also purchased parcel 11. So they have been the property owners since 2008. If we jump to the next slide, as staff mentioned, I'll refer to them as parcel 52, and you can see that those two parcels outlined in blue, and then parcel 11. As the gentleman noted on the chat, the parcel 11 is zoned to the R1. It's vacant and undeveloped, and it has been since it was purchased. As mentioned, parcel 52 is zoned to the C8. It is subject to a special exception that was approved back in 1983 to establish a mini warehousing facility. Both parcels, as mentioned, is owned by StorageMart. So parcel 11 is not subject to the special exception. However, they were mentioned, they were part of the conditions to remain residential at the time. So if we can go to the next slide, these are just images. I do have want to go through this briefly because I know there's quite a few questions, but these are existing conditions as you see them today. That's parcel 52 with existing self-storage. And then if we jump to the next slide, you can see images of parcel 11, which is a vacant lot today and borders the cloisters of Fairfax residential community. So if we jump to the next slide, staff has already at a high level gone through the current comprehensive plan recommendations. I've highlighted, you can see the parcels highlighted in blue again. As noted, parcel 52 in the current comp plan does identify the self-storage facility that's on there today. And should it redevelop in the future, it is planned for office use at a 0.25 FAR as mentioned. So what's interesting about parcel 11, if you look at the comprehensive plan recommendations, So it is grouped in with three other parcels. You can see parcel 51A, parcel 46, and also the southern portion of parcel 47A. All of these 4 parcels are planned for residential use up to 3 dwelling units per acre at the overlay level. That being said, I've highlighted in yellow the other parcels, and you can see those are all contiguous and connected. So it would seem to make sense that if that redeveloped in the future, it could be a larger development of residential. However, parcel 11 stands alone. So it would seem to be not logical for residential, at an overlay level to be able to develop it in that way. So because of parcel 11's limited size, it has restrictive setbacks and inadequate access. It has been very challenging. The applicant has tried to market this to residential developers, and there's just no market for that. So the question that's been left is, how do we make this lot usable, and what would be the best use of parcel 11? So that's why we have provided this nomination in order to simply amend. It wouldn't change the comprehensive plan recommendations necessarily for parcel 52, but it would allow for a redevelopment option that would allow for that existing self-storage to modestly expand onto parcel 11, which we'll talk in a little bit more detail in an upcoming slide. But I did want to touch upon on the next slide. Mr. Stewart talked about the area-wide recommendations. You can see I highlighted in red the little star. While we are in the suburban neighborhood, we are also right adjacent at the perimeter to the North Core Suburban Center, which is higher density. In review of what the plan envisions with the area-wide recommendations, as I've noted on the side, the nomination would not result in any new or expanded retail centers or office. It does promote a neighborhood serving use that supports and aids to preserve the surrounding stable residential homes. I know a lot of homes that surround are single family detached dwellings, and often even I live in one myself, and often having extra storage space is helpful within walking distance. And so that's why we felt like this would be a great use that would help to preserve residential around. It will, as you will see, it would integrate sufficient screening and buffering at transitional boundaries. And then the idea of the encroachment or expansion that staff mentioned, the proposed expansion is limited and it remains less than the encroachment of what's existing in the area today. And if we jump to the next slide, I illustrate that concept. So you can see the property and the expansion in the left-hand corner, and then the red line kind of shows the separation of existing residential from existing commercial. So the commercial to the east, you can see already encroaches into residential areas. So even with this modest expansion onto parcel 11, it's still less than kind of the overall expansion to existing commercial today. So we do think that it would be worth looking into the reconsideration of the plan recommendations for parcel 11. So if we jump to the next slide, as mentioned, this is what was shown by staff in terms of the proposed development. So we have the proposed nomination to the side where we talk about including an redevelopment options for both parcel 52 and 11 that will permit an expansion of the existing self-storage onto parcel 11. And we would say that it would be, people were asking about how the plan nomination language could be developed. We do think by allowing this expansion, there could be certain conditions to ensure that it would be compatible and in keeping with the surrounding residential. The expansion would only be onto parcel 11. As you can see, we would not modify the existing building, the site, the parking configuration, et cetera. That's on parcel 52. All of that would remain the same. The only thing being built on parcel 11 would be the building addition for new units. So there would not be any existing or no new parking or access that would be built on parcel 11. It would be building, merely building. And then to Mr. Wu's question, he had asked about what stops the property owner from selling this, I don't know, and it becoming a commercial strip mall or something. What would happen? It would require, because right now the parcel 11 is zoned R1. So if this went through, it would require a rezoning of parcel 11. But in doing so, whenever you rezone a property in Fairfax County, It runs with the land, and typically there are proffers that are associated with the rezoning. So we could easily proffer to this use specifically that it could not be, we can even preclude uses. It can't be, you know, a commercial strip mall. It can't be another use that may be undesirable. And we could certainly work with the community on that as to what would be appropriate on this site. And once those proffers are approved and granted by the Board of Supervisors, it becomes the part of the zoning ordinance. It becomes regulation. The only way that you could change whatever it's proffered would be another whole process of another rezoning, probably a proffered condition amendment, and we would go through all of this again. The community would have input. So in that regard, you can limit what type of development could go here, and even how parcel 11 would ultimately develop as well. So kind of just going through those bullet points, we would preserve all the existing mature vegetation that you can see around the perimeter of the site to the east and to the south. There is existing trees along the southern facade of the building today. Obviously, to build the addition, we would have to remove those trees. However, the intent is that the nominator would install a significant amount of new trees and landscaping on both the southern side as well as the western side, which would be new to provide a significant buffer adjacent to the existing residential communities. We also plan to integrate a number of pedestrian enhancement at the intersection of Route 29 and Shirley Gate. We were thinking you could integrate some sort of public corner plaza to promote placemaking and a sense of place. We know that there's an existing retaining wall that is, I think you saw in the image that I had shown of the existing site. That's actually not on the nominator's property. So just to clarify for everyone, if you look to the north of the site, that little drive aisle that abuts Lee Highway, that's actually property owned by the county. So the property line you can kind of see is where right south of that drive aisle. Although that retaining wall or Jersey barrier, whatever it may be, is not on the applicant's property, the nominator's property, they would be willing to work with the appropriate county and state departments if it would be possible to maybe do some sort of public art or anything on that Jersey wall. So in addition to the new plantings on parcel 11, you can see the nominator proposes to integrate some sort of public park or a similar pedestrian amenity to soften and also activate the transitional buffer between the existing self-storage and the surrounding residential community. So I think that would effectively create a more cohesive sense of place in that area. So if maybe you're walking by, if you wanted to walk over there, and if there was any type of public benches or something that could be implemented there. In terms of the architectural design, as mentioned, the intent would be to match what's there today. The size and addition would not exceed, nor would the nominator seek anything beyond what is allowed by the zoning ordinance or county policy in terms of FAR. The intent, as mentioned by staff, of the design is to be consistent in terms of scale and massing and height with the existing building today, and also to be consistent with the surrounding residential neighborhoods. So despite the plan, if we actually go to the next slide, you know, the nominator is willing to work with the community to design the addition. So this is not what we're saying the addition could be. As I mentioned, the intent is to fully screen the addition, one, but two, it would be to match it. However, I was just using this illustratively as an illustrative concept to show, you know, in other places, the applicant, the nominator, has been able to integrate a architectural style that is residential nature. So if that's something that the community was interested in doing, that's an option. So we just wanted to put that on the table, if that was a strong sentiment by the community to make it look more residential and not necessarily how we were intending to just make it consistent and match with the existing building today. So if we go to the next slides, these were some concepts that we had shared with the community. Just to show the intent of the new trees, you can see in the bottom left corner, you can see kind of the view with the red where you would be looking. So this just shows how we would want to screen this addition as you're driving by with the trees. And if you actually go to the next slide, this is as if you were standing from the cloisters of Fairfax community. I mean, really, you wouldn't see the building. The intent is you would not see the building by the time those trees were fully grown. And what the trees that are there today, we would not remove at all. But, you know, planting the new trees, the hope is to completely buffer this from complete view from the adjacent neighborhood. So lastly, I just wanted to very briefly discuss, I'm not going to go through this, all the bullet points of the next slide you're about to see, but we have begun engagement specifically with the communities that are directly, the HOAs that are directly adjacent to this site. So working with the supervisor's office, we contacted the Cloisters of Fairfax HOA as well as Deerfield Forest HOA, and I primarily worked with the presidents, the current presidents of those HOAs. We had one meeting with the HOA board, you can see back in April of 2024, where we received some feedback and tried to implement feedback or implement changes based on that feedback. Then the most recent is we did send out a pretty extensive informational pamphlet to both communities, which we provided to the presidents and they distributed to their residents. Following up, because we are concerned, just to show that we are concerned about how the community views this. We want to be good neighbors. We want to work with the community on what's going to happen on this site. So we have tried to do our best to involve the community as soon as possible. So we did send out a survey monkey. Subsequent to sending out that informational pamphlet, again, I worked with the presidents of those HOAs. If we go to the next slide, of the residents that, we sent it out, I was not involved in who got sent this informational pamphlet and the link to the Survey Monkey. However, based on our efforts in doing so, we did get about 26 participants who responded to the Survey Monkey. These were the questions that we had provided. Generally, you can see the responses that we got. For the most part, it did seem positive. And so we were encouraged by that. But again, really just to show that we are open and willing to work with the community to make sure that this expansion would be in keeping with what they envision, how they want it to be screened, things like that. So if we go to the last slide, that pretty much sums up my presentation. We do believe that this is an opportunity to positively revision and redevelop an underutilized parcel, specifically parcel 11. With this proposal, the nominator will integrate a number of improvements that will enhance and improve the pedestrian realm in this area, we believe, such as placemaking opportunities, a more robust vegetated buffers, and public amenities. So in addition, by providing more self-storage units that would be, quote unquote, closer to home in this location, right next to communities made up of single family detached dwellings, we believe this neighborhood serving use will continue to effectively support and preserve that surrounding stable residential neighborhoods consistent with current plan, comprehensive plan goals for the overall Fairfax Center area. And I know there's a lot of questions, so I'll stop there, but we are happy to answer any of the questions that are proposed. Thank you. And we do have the, thanks, Ryan. Sorry, we do have the nominator on the call too. So if there's other questions that he can answer, we're happy to do so.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Kathy. That's a lot of good information we have here. Before I open it up for spoken comments, I just wanted to note that we had some discussion here in the chat during your presentation on some zoning issues and kind of some stormwater and things like that. Just to be clear, the plan amendment process is really, it's the step before zoning. And so any changes at the plan level would then most likely necessitate some sort of rezoning, whether that's a full rezoning to a different district or amending the current entitlements that are on the site as they currently stand today. We certainly have processes for that. We may need to amend the stormwater management system as well as part of this, just depending on where that is. But those issues would be addressed at the rezoning level. And I was just wondering, Kathy, if you might want to just speak to that difference a bit and kind of what the plans might be for the rezoning. I know we're not dealing with that today, but just that we've gotten questions on it.
And I'm sorry, I would specifically, is there I know there's been a lot of questions. I also have not been looking at that. Is there something specifically related to that? Like I said,
well, it would be your intent, and I don't mean to ask a leading question, but if this plan amendment were to go through and were to be approved, it would be your intent to either modify the existing entitlements, the special exception on the property, or to rezone the property to facilitate this.
Correct. We would require, at least for parcel 11, as I mentioned, it's R1 today. So in order to, if this plan amendment got approved, or at least as we work through the nomination, then in order to achieve any type of addition, we would have to take it through a rezoning, to rezone that site. The existing building is subject to an SE, so we would have to look back on the conditions, and likely it would also require some sort of special exception amendment to that SE, or if both parcels need to be rezoned, that's something that it is more of the engineering and the design, which we're very much at the conceptual level. And so we're just trying to allow the use. And then once the use is permitted, then we can kind of look at how the rezoning, the land use entitlements may need to be changed or adjusted in order to allow for the use onto parcel 11. Is that what you answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think that I just wanted to just get your feedback on that, just kind of set the stage.
Yeah,
That we're at a plan amendment right now level, which is a policy level. It doesn't, the things that we're discussing this evening don't really have much, immediate bearing on what the rezoning might look like. We'll discuss those details when and if we get to that point. We're really looking at this point of not even whether the use is appropriate here, but whether this proposal should be evaluated for whether this use is appropriate. So we're even at a step before the plan amendment. But just to give everyone a sense of if a project like this project or another project like this would move forward, we would have a plan amendment and then followed by a rezoning process if that's necessary. But in general, each stage of that wheel I showed earlier has a different level of detail, and this is very conceptual at this point.
Yeah, and I'll just say to that, when we go through the rezoning process, we will also, it's also a public hearing process. So this is not, in terms of community input, this is not the first bite of any apple, right? We're going to be coming to the community again when we go through the rezoning, even if the SSPA nomination gets put into the work program. This is very much a collaborative effort, or we want it to be a collaborative effort with the community. We don't want to just push this down anybody's throats. We would like to work with the community to make sure that, we are able to utilize this property in a better way than it is today, just as a vacant lot. And so just again, we are open to feedback and just really talking through the issues and understanding what the concerns are.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So I want to start with some comments here from people who have their hands raised. Christopher Wu, I see you've got your hand raised. First in the queue.
I think a lot of it was answered, but maybe it's not the correct form for when we were talking about the proffers and the zoning restrictions, but it just seems like a lot of it is a lot harder to claw back if it moves past this stage in terms of just reviewing this proposal. I was going over the one-pager that was done by the SSPA process, and I think the last two paragraphs are pretty on point for kind of going over what I think are the biggest concerns. I'm on the board of Cloisters of Fairfax. I'm the treasurer, so we are directly behind it. I think one of the biggest things is you can't see it because of the trees, until fall, and then you can see it for the next 5 months, clean as day. So I don't really see that as a mitigating, kind of use of the smaller amount of trees that will be left. Also, I had a question that was in the chat. I'm confused by the proposed, or at least what she had in her slide, saying that they would be kind of targeting a 0.25 FAR, and then the SSPA's one-pager, which says that the target looks like it'll be up to 1.1 FAR with the additional 45,000 square feet, bringing it to 105,000.
I'm looking right now for that figure here.
Yeah, the 0.25 FAR is the office use, the overlay option for the office use. If it were to redevelop as office, right now the comp plan limits the development to a 0.25 FAR. So I think that's the reference that you're referring to, Mr. Wu. In terms of the 1.0 FAR. So right now we are, in terms of the expansion, we have no intent of exceeding what's allowable by the zoning ordinance as well as what's permissible in the policy plan. In terms of density and also footprint, because we are still working through the details of the design, that could fluctuate as we go through the process once it gets more designed. So that's sort of a range right now. It would not exceed, I think, whatever is allowed in the zoning ordinance. For example, in the C8, which is where parcel 52 is today, you can get up to a 0.7 FAR. By special exception. So it's I think a 0.5 without a special exception, you could go by right, but then once you seek a higher FAR up to a 0.7, you would need an SE, a special exception. And so again, there you're limited by 0.7. So if we rezone to C8, then we would be limited by 0.7. We would not be able to go up to a 1.1. So whatever we end up rezoning to, we would stay within the bounds or the limits of what the zoning ordinance allows.
Sure. And then I think my final comment doesn't really have a question associated with it, was that once these two parcels are joined, it's however the proffers are written, however the restrictions are written, they can be sold, and it will be easier for them to be treated as one property because they are one property. Right now.
Correct. But even, sorry, go ahead.
But right now they are still a buffer of parcel 11 being on its own. If you guys wanted to build R1, enhancements to that property, I don't think anybody in Cloisters of Fairfax would have any issue with that. But once you join it to plot 52, then it becomes one huge new plot, and maybe 25, maybe 50 years down the road, it's an issue. But those are issues that are in the minds of people who just bought their house last week.
Sure. And I can appreciate that. And I guess the one thing I would say to that, as I said, proffers run with the land. So, you could have a proffer that says you have to have a buffer for forever, and that would run with the land. Those proffers, even when the property owners change, the proffers run with the land. So it does, though, that new owner is subject to those proffers. So if a new owner comes in, they sell it to another developer, and they want to tear everything down and put up a completely different use, they have to go back and look at the proffers and say, what do the proffers, how is my development limited, which is what the proffers do, is it limits what can be developed on that. If there's a proffer that says you always have to have a 10-foot buffer between, or 35-foot buffer, or 40-foot buffer, whatever, between the two parcels, they have to honor, whoever owns that property has to honor those proffers. The only way you can change it, again, is you would have to go through a process like this, a public hearing. You need to get proffer condition amendment. So there are ways to kind of make sure that whatever use is on there and the limitations of such use, that those stay in place because proffers run with the land. Does that make sense?
Right, but if those parcels are never joined, then the fight becomes a lot easier if there is any fight that needs to happen. So if it's just going to be rezoning 11 to commercial, then that would be a lot easier fight than fighting a new parcel which combines both 52 and 11, because you guys have more pull. It's one single property in that point. So that pretty much is all of my comments. I think I would just be rehashing stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. That's a really good comment. It is one that's more tailored to the zoning discussion in terms of how the proffers might be constructed and how this might be interpreted. But we're happy to answer any of those specific questions after this if you'd like to continue that conversation, just because it's a little bit more detailed and a little bit outside the scope of the plan amendment. But again, it's a great question. Aref, I see you're next here with your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, yes.
Okay, maybe you should meet me. How do I show my face?
There should be an option there for you to be able to start your video.
Oh, it's hidden. I see a mic, and then I see, the camera here?
Yeah, it's a camera icon.
Hold on. Oh, hold on. Can you
there
see
you
me
go.
now?
I can see you now. Great.
And it's the old guy. You want me to put my younger picture there when I was 35, working around Fairfax County, all the streets around? I know Fairfax County better than back of my hand. I've done business for the 45 years. I've been in every street in Fairfax County. I've done a couple of homes at least in every street, almost every street. So I know that area very well. I can answer everybody's question. And let's put away the smoke and mirror, the charade game, the magician game, the shiny object. We're going to expand. They're not here to expand anything. They're here to change the zoning to industrial. That's what they're here to block the public service road. Shirley, if you let me share the screen with you, I'll go over it real quick and I'll show you what they're trying to do.
I don't have the option of sharing the screens right now for the
no,
for
I have it right
individuals,
here. I can show it to you.
But what I can do is if you'd want to, I know you posted some images there in the chat for us. You're welcome to do that. There's also, if you'd like to send those comments into us via email, we can include that in the video.
People. The wolf is after the prey on closure of Fairfax. The property value is going to drop tremendously. It's going to be feet away with a lot zone industrial. And I stopped by there when I was going to Lowe's and asked a guy, do you know these guys going to change the zoning next door, like 10 feet away from Alex Court to industrial? That overlay is for C8 and office. Is not for, this is not Chantilly, Willard Road, Lawton, Lockport, which I used to have warehouses there, or Sandy Louis, Fairfax, or Draper Road in Fairfax. This is the Fairfax Center should be hold to utmost upstandard standards. And that lot is in the corner of Lee Highway and Shirley Gate. When 45,000 cars every day pass through Lee Highway, Shirley Gate is connecting to Fairfax County Parkway. They expected, if you show me, let me show present everything, I'll show you all with documentation. Another 15,000 cars is going to go through Shirley Gate Road. So that's the gateway from 66 to Shirley Gate. And that's why they're here. They're not here for extension. That's smoke and mirror. They're here to change the zoning and block the public service road and travel lane on to Shirley Gate Highway. The guy here is Christopher. Do you live in Closure or Fairfax?
Yep.
You do?
Yep.
Okay, how did you know there's a meeting here?
We were actually notified by a flyer in our mailbox, plus there's the
by whom?
A flyer in the mailbox, like a little postal.
Yeah,
notice.
see, it looks like a little advertising, right? But did the management on the HOA notify you they're going to change the zoning to industrial right next door to you guys? Especially Alex Code is going to be destroyed. Did the management company, national partner, NRT, or whomever it is, I send them email, they ignore me. Did they notify you? They're about to change the zoning right next door, 10 feet away from Alex Court to industrial. Do you know what industrial means? Contractors, trucks. They don't let me show you all the pictures, what they're planning to do. You're being preyed on. You're going to be destroyed. See, the whole process is illegal to begin with. There is no Lot 11. Lot 11 does not exist. Can you hear me still?
Yes, we can hear you.
Lot 11 does not exist physically. It only exists on site map and only exists as a historical reference. If I wish you could let me share a screen here, I can show everybody why. Lot 11 is like a septic field for a house. In this case, this is a commercial land. They call it stormwater management. Septic land value is $2,900 on the tax assessment. That means that's the price for the storm management, like a septic field. You already have a big gap and buffered with a lot of trees. That's why when the supervisor were planning their special exception, they made sure there is a distance between residential and the commercial. Nobody wants self-storage, like Ms. Taylor says here. They want, everybody wants to be close to self-storage. Love to see. Nobody wants self-storage next to their home, or nobody wants industrial or anything like that next to their home. It took them 8 years to get that special exception approved. 1983, they started that, and they got approved 1991, in the beginning 1991. Many roadblocks because County land development, not the planning, land development would not allow them because they didn't have sufficient BMP for water storage management. Plus, they couldn't go connect to behind my lot to stormwater drainage. And they needed to purchase lot 11 to make it like a septic field for a house. These people are telling you we're going to expand, put the building there. First of all, they're not going to do that. That's not their here. That's smoke on the screen. That's just to deceive you. That's what they want to do. They're here for zoning change. They want to change it to industrial so they can rent it to shopkeepers, flex building like contractors with shops and office. They can rent it to warehouse retail. Right now, they're using 5 zoning there. Right now, as we speak, right now, they're in violation of zoning inspection. They have kitchen and century kitchen and bath doing retail there. They're renting it to contractors, flex office. They would have they have 61,000 square feet there right now. If you count the tunnel and the drive-through, it becomes about 70,000 square, more than 120% FAR. You were worried about FAR? They already have more than 100% FAR. Rest of it is dedication for the street dedication, future street dedication with Shirley Gate when connects to Fairfax County Parkway. Fairfax County is going to exercise that dedication. The same lady here is going to sue Fairfax County. If you change the zoning, all those rules and for a special exception that governs that building, that shouldn't have been there. That area of Fairfax County is designed for offices, restaurants, Starbucks, Sweetwater restaurant, things like that.
Hey,
high
Raf.
end.
Yes. I don't mean to interrupt, but I do also want to give other people a chance to comment.
Just want to know the
if you
whole
can please
thing is
just
a
wrap up your
charade.
comments,
They're not here for extension. That's smoke in the mirror. That's shiny object. They pull the rabbit and hide it. They're here for zoning change. They're here to get rid of that travel lane. They want to rent it to contractors. They can't do it now because a special extension doesn't let them. And they're in Fairfax City Center area, which requires high-end stuff, not industrial, not warehouses. So don't be fooled. They're not here for extension. They're not going to They're going to use it parking lot for contractor. Once the zoning is passed, they're here for zoning to change. They have 5 zoning right now on them: self-storage, retail, flex building, and they're adding industrial on top of that, so they can do anything they want. And then they're going to sue the county.
I do want to clarify one moment you made a reference, because I've heard several times that they're planning on an industrial zoning, and I just want to clarify that decision, has not been made yet. We're not at a zoning stage, and so if I can continue, sir, if I can continue, please. If this plan amendment does go through, and the plan is ultimately amended, the county would then look at what zoning might be appropriate to affect that. But
listen,
we're not to a point. Excuse me, sir.
Can I add something? Can I add something?
Please, quickly, please. We need to move on.
So if the zoning is not, I have the letter of justification from the StorageMart. No mention of changing the zoning to industrial. So that means they cannot justify it, right? They cannot justify it in that overlay designed for retail and offices and restaurant high-end places. So on the CPN number, they hide it under it. Nobody sees it. Everybody is concentrating expansion of the StorageMart to lot 11, which doesn't exist. Is a septic field for the commercial land. That's what it is. Is unbuildable. Zero. This value is zero. The Fairfax County assessed it at $2,900. That's the price for septic field. The storage water management. For commercial, they call it store water management.
Mr.
I do think that we really need to move on now. We're getting to a point where we're approaching 8:30, and we do have another nomination to cover. And so I do want to make sure that we get to that and that we are able to solicit the other comments. But if we want to continue the discussion here, I'm happy to do that. It's just right now we need to really focus on moving forward to the next nomination. But what we'll do is, if you have any screenshots or pictures or anything like that you'd like to share with us, I'm sorry, I regret we're not able to have the presentation. But what we can do is, if you can post those into the chat, as you've done with the other documents, we'll be happy to take a look at them and we can share those with the public that way.
Show it to you now or show it later?
No, if you'll just post it in the chat, that way everyone can see what it was you were referencing.
There's so
I
many
just
of
don't
them.
have the ability to share your screen for
They
a presentation.
violated million things. I have million pictures.
Mr.
So let
Aref,
me just show screen
Mr.
share one
Aref,
PDF file.
excuse me, Mr. Aref, I think the best thing that you
Yes,
could do would be to send your pictures to Ryan, and we
Mhm.
can include his
I
email.
already done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Listen, I've been
Yeah,
to
you've got
the
some
Fairfax
pictures for me
County.
as well, but
Excuse me, Mr. Aref, we need to move on. And so
Mhm.
I
Who
think
am I talking to? Who are you? Who are you?
excuse me, I work for the planning department. So I
You
think
work for. I was talking to Mr. Stuart. Why did you jump in?
because I'm a supervisor and
That's
you're
very
starting to
rude of
become,
you.
excuse
I
me,
was talking to
all
Mr.
right,
Stuart. Why did you
Mr.
excuse me,
jump
Aref,
in?
it's
Mr.
okay.
Aref,
I think
you're
what
being
we can do is
disruptive. And so what we're gonna have to do is move on to the next item, but thank you for your input.
yeah.
But this is smoke and mirror. They're here to change zoning. That's all.
I appreciate your comments, but we are going to have to move on now, just given the time. But again, we can
They're
continue the
gonna sue
conversation later.
Fairfax County when you do your
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and now move on to the next nomination here, unless there's some last minute comments here. If we can go ahead and fill out the chat there, we'll come back to those. But I do recognize that we are approaching 8:30, and so I want to make sure that we get the next nomination in here. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my colleague, Mike Linsky. He's the project manager on the Springfield District nominations. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him for the presentation. And Mike, if you'll just tell me when to advance the slides, I'm happy to do that for you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so I'm handling the Springfield nomination. We originally had 3 nominations in Springfield District, but the other 2 were not forwarded to the screening process. So this is the only one remaining. And as we discussed before, this is really the screening process to determine if this will even move forward to a full plan amendment consideration. So it's like a enhanced screening. The original nomination period just sort of screens things to make sure they're eligible. So this is getting to another level of detail. But so we're really just determining if these will even be considered for a plan amendment, and then the details of that will come later. So anyway, you can move on, Ryan. One more. Okay, so this image shows the nominator's concept for this, which is down the road on farther west on Route 29, and it's overlaid on an aerial photo of the area. So this is a 5.86 acre site located. It's also within a suburban neighborhood portion of the Fairfax Center area plan. It's in subunit R2, which is planned for residential use at 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre. And the surrounding area to the west and to the south are also planned and developed for 1 to 2 dwelling units an acre. However, there's a by right public use directly next door to the west, which I believe it's 12 bed probation facility. And then the neighboring Buckley's Reserve development to the east, that's in subunit R3 of the Fairfax Center area, and that's planned and developed at 3 to 4 dwelling units an acre. And the nominator proposes an independent living use with approximately 117 units, as shown on the graphic. The comp plan generally supports independent living uses in suburban neighborhood areas, but this proposal requires a site-specific amendment to the plan to increase the level of plan density to accommodate the proposal. So next slide. So the existing conditions, let's see, yeah. My text got messed up here on my notes, but anyway, so you can see the existing conditions. So this is 3 separate parcels. The majority of it is zoned R1, except for there's a portion that's almost an acre right along Route 29, which is zoned for C8 zoning, and there's a commercial rental business there. So let's see. Yeah, my notes got messed up, but anyway. So the issue here is the independent living use is actually, it's like I said, the comp plan would generally support it, and the zoning ordinance, it can be permissible in an R1 zoning with a special exception. However, it's not permissible in a C8 zoning. So in order to do that use on this, it seems like at least the C8 portion of this property would have to be rezoned, if not the whole thing. So that's, but then also we get into the level of intensity, which, excuse me 1 second, I have to bring up my, I transferred my notes to a piece of paper and they got a little screwed up on me. Okay, oh yeah, in addition to that, so this area is planned for 1 to 2 dwelling units an acre, but the plan also recommends that any remaining individual commercial uses along Route 29 are eventually replaced with uses that are more compatible with the suburban residential character. So the plan would like to see some of these commercial uses eventually get phased out and a more compatible use go in there. Okay, you can move to the next slide. So as previously stated, the comp plan, it generally supports independent living uses in suburban neighborhood areas, subject to the necessary special exception or rezoning review that would consider the details of the proposal. And the plan also acknowledges that in some cases, additional density may be appropriate in order to support county goals, such as providing senior housing or affordable housing. But to that end, the zoning ordinance does include a provision allowing a density increase for independent living uses in excess of the typical comp plan recommended density. Typically, that's a 4-to-1 density multiplier in most residential districts. That means that an independent living use could be developed. So if this was all R1, or in the current planning, it's planned for 1 to 2 dwelling units an acre. So a 2 dwelling, if you see in the top level of that chart there, you could theoretically develop 11 residential units, but with an independent living use, the zoning ordinance allows a multiplier of 4-to-1, which means you could develop independent living use up to 46 independent living units in the current planning of 2 dwelling units an acre. And in return for that, that zoning ordinance provision requires additional open space beyond what is normally required. So in that case, it would require 60% of the site be preserved as open space, as compared to a PDH2 zoning district, which only requires 20%. So the nominator's proposal of 117 units would require a planned density of 5 dwelling units an acre, which, when utilizing that same multiplier, would be the equivalent of 20 dwelling units an acre, which would allow the 117 units. And as you go up in density, that required open space drops to, at that point, it's 35%, which is actually pretty much the same as a PDH5. And then the building height allowed, the zoning ordinance multiplier also specifies a maximum 50-foot building height, compared to a lot of these, like R1 district would normally allow up to 60-foot height for a non-residential use. So it's slightly less of a height. Okay, next slide. And as far as the physical characteristics of the site does feature a lot of topographical change. The property is sort of at a high point, and there are 10 to 15% slopes falling to the east and west over much of the site. And most of the site's forested in existing conditions, with the exception of the commercial portion. So accommodating a relatively high development intensity on the site would require extensive regrading and manipulation of the site, which would be challenging. And stormwater runoff would have to be carefully managed to avoid impacts to the neighboring residential properties, since the natural topography directs any excess runoff to those areas. And we're not yet analyzing the specifics of those kind of impacts at this stage in the process, but just those general aspects should be considered when determining an appropriate level of planned density for the site. Next slide. And one final aspect to mention is there was a similar development to what is proposed to the south, almost directly across Route 29, that underwent a site-specific plan amendment and rezoning back in about 2017. That property was also originally planned for residential at 1 to 2 dwelling units an acre, and it was replanned for a density of 4 dwelling units an acre and rezoned to the PDH4 district to facilitate that redevelopment. And that project also utilized that zoning multiplier to permit 92 independent living units at an effective density of about 16 dwelling units an acre. One difference in that development, though, is at that time the ordinance allowed an additional 78 assisted living units as a secondary use without being counted towards the density level. And that resulted in a total 170 combined units, which is equivalent to about 28 dwelling units an acre if they were all considered residential units. But the zoning ordinance has since been amended to kind of further limit the amount of secondary units that can be permitted. But having said that, the current nominator indicates that they don't have any intention of including any secondary assisted living component on the current site. I just wanted to mention that because that ended up at a higher intensity than would be reflected in the planned residential density. But that site did manage somehow to provide 58% of open space on that site, though. Okay, so next slide. So our considerations here. So our main considerations, the independent living use itself would generally be supported by the plan in this type of location, subject to the necessary zoning review and approvals. And the zoning ordinance would likely allow a 4 times density increase over the recommended plan density. But all of that could be pursued without a plan amendment. So what we're really talking about here is the ability to develop at a higher density than that. So that's really what we're talking about, is the level of density that's proposed. So the main questions before us at this stage is whether a plan amendment for the additional density increase should be considered for this site. And considerations include the extent to which such development would remain compatible with the neighboring uses, how site-specific considerations such as topography and environmental impacts impact that decision. And then the PC and the board, they'll ultimately be deciding which of many proposed SSPA nominations to prioritize to include on our work program, which sets the planning division's work for the next several years. So they'll also be considering to the extent to which nomination addresses some kind of planning inequity or forwards larger county goals and objectives. So sort of prioritizing these nominations as compared to each other. So all of those are considerations, and any input you provide through this process will be combined with staff's analysis and forwarded to them to help make their decision. So with that, I can answer any questions on this. Sorry, I haven't kept up with the chat or anything, but I don't see any hands up at the moment.
I don't see any hands up, Mike. We've got some just some comments here in the chat. One is on let's see here. Comment that we've got the entire Willowmead neighborhood is on well water. We have a comment there. A comment, there's a housing shortage in the DMV area, not a shortage in assisted living. Why not build housing on an already R1 lot? Not sure if that's a question necessarily for the developer, but maybe we can ask the nominator to answer that question.
I forgot. We should probably get to the nominator does have a presentation, so we should do that before questions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Perfect.
So if you can hold your questions, we'll let the nominator present, and then I'm happy to answer anything. And I believe.
Okay, great.
Give him sure he should be on the line.
Okay, perfect. And I'll go ahead and if you'll just let me know when you'd like me to advance your slides, I'm happy to do that for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Great.
Yes.
Everyone, I'm Giff Hampshire. I'm with the law firm of Blankenship and Keith. You'll see it up there on the screen. We're a law firm here in Fairfax. And with me is Monica Phillips from Walter Phillips, who is the engineer on the site, and Bob White from Landmark Commercial Realty, who's a consultant for the owner, which is Metropolitan Communication Properties. Mr. and Mrs. Charles Hefner are the individuals who are connected with that. I don't see them on this meeting, but in case they're here, I wanted to introduce them. Next slide, please. I have some slides. Michael covered the proposal very well. I'd like just to talk to you for a little bit, focusing on this slide. As you can see, and as Mr. Linsky told you, this property is composed of 3 parcels for about 5.86 acres, and it's located at 12716 Lee Highway. Those of you who have lived in the area for a while know it as historically as a site where the Capital Rentals facility was located. Right now, it's no longer a rental facility. It's currently being leased to Atlantic Duct Cleaning. You may see their trucks on there, at least the commercial section of it. So it has been kind of a landmark use in the area. And what we are proposing tonight, consistent with what you've heard, both from a general point of view and also from the previous presenter for the previous application, is something, in our case, we think that we are doing something for a long-term planning consistent with the very nature of comprehensive planning that will respond to an emerging need in Fairfax County for the provision of senior housing. We want the community to understand that the property is under lease right now, under a 4-year lease with a right of renewal for 5 years. So we really are consistent with the nature of comprehensive planning, doing kind of a long-term plan for the use of the property in the future. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow, and certainly, as the past application said, we need, by definition, would need to go through a rezoning and a site plan process, even if we were to start tomorrow, which we're not going to do. And as stated in our statement of justification, I mentioned a second ago that we're responding to an emerging community need. Our statement of justification pointed out that the percentage of residents 65 or older is supposed to increase from 13.4% now to about 17.7% in 2035. And even at 13.4% of the population of Fairfax County, that works out to about 1 resident in 7 in Fairfax County. So we have an aging population. And as you may have heard, as you did hear from Mr. Linsky earlier, another key component to keep in mind is that unlike the Brightview proposal across the street, we do not propose to offer memory care or assisted living. We are completely focused on independent living for seniors who want an active lifestyle but do not want the burden of maintaining a yard. They want to downsize, and they want to simplify their lives and move into a unit that is affordable on their retired income. And that's our goal. When they get old enough to need a memory care or assisted living, we think that they could look elsewhere for that, including across the street at the Brightview facility. We also think that not offering the memory care or the assisted living helps to address some of the impacts that we heard. And by the way, as a resident from the Buckley's Reserve stated, we did meet with the Springfield Land Use Committee in January and received some feedback from those who were there. And they were indeed overwhelmingly from the Willowsmead community. And in a moment, I'll tell you how we responded to some of the comments we heard. But some of the comments that we heard related to the impacts of things that you have with assisted living and memory care, namely ambulances and other things that produce noise and other impacts that you might not have from a completely independent living facility. The other thing to keep in mind is, as Mr. Stewart said in his presentation, is that one of the objectives of a site-specific plan amendment is to respond and tell you and tell the county and the community how it is that this proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan goals. And in our statement of justification, we point out that there are a number of policy plan goals that encourage the provision of senior housing. Notably, Objective 2 in Policy B, which promotes the development of multifamily and senior housing, and Objective 5, which states that one should try to increase the income of supply, the amount of housing available to seniors and low and moderate income persons. Another component of the comprehensive plan that we think we serve is that this facility serves a logical planning area. And this slide, the reason I'm focusing on this slide for right now, is that it does show in kind of a bookmark way the way it integrates with the existing Brightview facility in a logical planning area for this kind of independent and on the other side of the street, the assisted living. This makes it convenient for drop-off for public transportation and county transportation. It provides for socialization between the facilities. It provides for increased access to senior services and the transfer from one facility to the other when the time comes, and if it's convenient for the residents. So in summary, we think we are responding to an emerging need for senior housing, and it's consistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan. Let's move to the next slide, if you would. We'll go through these very quickly because Mr. Linsky covered these. This is just the tax map, which shows the 3 parcels in lavender. And you can see the parcel next to Route 29, which is currently zone C8. Mr. Linsky also referred to the fact that, and I'll show you this in a minute, that the comprehensive plan currently states that the existing commercial uses along this stretch of Route 29 should not be expanded. And we think that this proposal would certainly comply with that policy plan, with that comprehensive plan guidance. You can see across the street, you can see the Brightview facility, which is zone PDH4, which is the zoning we would ultimately seek with that multiplier effect that Mr. Linsky talked about to get to a density of about 20 units per acre for the independent living facility. You will also see right next door the commercial facility which is Foundations, which is a county-run facility. It's actually run by the Fairfax County Juvenile Domestic Relations Court for troubled teens. And then you see the Buckley's Reserve community and the Willowsmead communities on each side. And we are certainly committed to, and have already done so to the extent we've heard feedback, to responding to community concerns about the compatibility of this facility with the existing development. Next slide, please. This is a slide that just shows the existing zoning in more of an area. This is from the zoning analysis webpage that the county has, and you can see there the little red dot, which is the existing C8 area, which is about an acre, as Mr. Linsky said. The remainder of the site is zoned R1, along with the rest of the Willowmead community. You see across the street the Brightview facility, currently zoned PDH4, a part of Buckley's Reserve, the higher density section zone PDH4. You also see to the west the existing Willows, the towing company there that is currently zoned C8. And were this proposal successful, and we ultimately, some years from now, rezoned it consistent with the comprehensive planning change, that would leave the towing company as the only C8 zoning on the corridor consistent with comprehensive plan policy guidance. Next slide, please. This is an interesting slide because it shows, as opposed to the zoning, it shows what the current comprehensive plan envisions for the site. So you can see, if you recall from the previous slide, the smaller red area on our property, you see that actually the comprehensive plan calls for the zoning on the site to be changed to be almost all commercial in the future, which is interesting because that seems to contradict the guidance for this land use area that the commercial uses should not be expanded. So we think this change responds to that need. The brown color is across the street is high density residential for the Brightview. So essentially what we would be talking about here would be coloring our site from red to brown to go from commercial to high density residential and consistent with, again, the Brightview community. Next slide, please. Here's just a picture from the Brightview website. This is just illustrative of what's there. You all who are in the community certainly know this, don't need to repeat it, but this is just one idea of what the architectural rendering could look like. We would want to be compatible with that area across the street. But we don't have an elevation at this point in time. It's a little early for that. Next slide, please. This is a slide that just shows very briefly the area where, as Mr. Linsky said, we are in subunit R2. And you can see this paragraph that I'm referring to down there, the very last paragraph, which says that existing spot commercially zoned parcels along Lee Highway should not be expanded or intensified. Redevelopment uses which are more compatible with the adjacent planned residential area should be encouraged. So we think that we are actually consistent with this guidance We understand there's a difference in density between what we're proposing and what's there now, but we are certainly consistent with the idea that existing spot commercial should not be expanded. Next slide, please. Here is the recommendation for the Brightview area, which is subunit. Excuse me, next slide. We already covered that. This is the land use recommendation for the Brightview facility, which is in Unit T across the street. And you can see what happened here, which is what we're looking for, something similar, which says that as an option at an overlay level, tax map parcels, and they list them, may be appropriate for residential use up to a density of 4 dwelling units per acre for independent and/or assisted living facility provided the following conditions are met. And there are a bunch of conditions there, which we would expect also to have something similar imposed upon us. But again, the major difference between what is there for Brightview and what we are proposing is that we would not be doing assisted living. So somebody asked earlier about when are you going to get around to drafting the plan language? Well, this is an example of what was drafted in the past. We would expect, if we ever got to that stage, that the and/or assisted living facility would be removed and it would just be an independent living. But we would also expect that there would be language similar to what we have here below, which we can't see all of the bullets, but that certainly visual impacts and other mitigating factors would be expected. And next slide, please. And so finally, here is, as you saw earlier, this is our concept. It's by definition a concept. It's very rough. When we went to the Springfield Land Use Committee meeting in January, we had a different version of this that was closer to the residential community in the back and farther away from Route 29. We then met with Supervisor Harity at his office, and as a result of those meetings, we moved this building as far forward as we possibly could, closer to Route 29, and provided as much buffering as we could around the community so that the mass of the building would be mitigated to the extent possible from the adjoining residential community. That's what I have in the way of a presentation, and our team is here and available to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Giff. And so we've been fielding some questions on the chat, and looks like Daniel Jankus has his hand up for a question.
Yeah, thanks. And I see a bunch of other ones rolling in. I'm just curious how a facility like this is considered residential and not commercial. I mean, even with independent living, there are staff there on the property. There's people working there. That sounds commercial to me. And I would say the same with Brightview across the way. I'm just surprised it's zoned residential. Is that typical of
it's actually considered a healthcare use by the ordinance, but it's a use that's allowable in a residential district, but it does require a special exception. So it's not allowed by right. You have to be able to, and part of that special exception process is looking at impacts and compatibility and all that. So
yeah, and that's what we're talking about.
So it doesn't require you to rezone to, so it's not considered commercial. It doesn't require you to rezone to a commercial district. So it's considered possibly compatible with residential, or at least it's allowable, subject to, there's some more hoops you have to go through, a special exception process.
That answers my question.
Yeah. And so like I said, the ordinance has ways of dealing with it, and even providing a little intensity bonus for doing independent living versus regular residential, just to encourage, more independent living and senior housing in the county. So that's the purpose of the zoning ordinance multiplier, and then there's a special exception which has, requires them to look at impacts and things. So a lot of that's handled through the ordinance. So really what we're talking about at this plan stage is whether or not, and like I said, you could go through all that process under the current plan and pursue independent living. You still have to go through the special exception process and determine if it all is, workable on the site. But you could do all that without a plan amendment. So really what we're talking about now is whether a plan amendment for additional level of density is it's basically going from 40 something units to 117 units, whether that's worth looking at. Okay, so I guess we can go to Carolyn or Michael Blazinski. Are either one of you there? It says Carolyn and Michael.
You guys are on mute.
Or we could come back to you. How about Ava?
Yes, I have 2 questions. This is Ava Wentz, and
Okay.
Mike Wentz is here too. This Brightview across the street has considerably more green space, and yet the homes adjacent to it are much further away than the Willamette homes, which are really close proximity, and also Buckley's Reserve in close proximity to this facility. And the other thing is, I'm looking at there's no acceleration or deceleration lanes on this drawing to get into this.
Yeah, so those kind of things would definitely be looked at, with the special exception, or this will have to be rezoned actually too, because it's C8 now. So otherwise it wouldn't, if it was already zoned R1, it would not necessarily have to go through a rezoning, but this will have to because of the C8, which doesn't allow independent living. And then to answer another question, having the split zone nature of this, where more than half of it's R1 and half of it's C8, the same uses really aren't, for the most part, supported in either of those. It's hard to do anything cohesively with this site without rezoning it to a consistent zoning district. And it wouldn't be C8 because the plan wouldn't support that much expansion of commercial here. So it really needs to go, zoning wise, it needs to go in the residential direction. And then whether or not independent living happens on it requires an additional hoop of, it might be able to be done through the rezoning or a special exception, but one of those two.
I was very concerned about that, the drawing showing the water runoff, stormwater runoff. It goes in every direction, and we already have flooding problems in our neighborhood. This just looks like it's going to be more
yeah, I mean, it would be required to manage that as part of a development plan, but it is more challenging when there's no outlet for the water. Like, you can't outlet it towards the street very easily or anything. It all kind of goes towards the east and the west. So they would have to sort of over control stormwater probably to ensure so it would just make it more difficult.
Is 29 widening going to provide for stormwater runoff of the parcels adjacent to it?
Hasn't it 20? I don't know if 29 is going to be further widened. I think it's already been
it's being widened. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, but this site pretty much drains to the east and west and not towards the street. So that's why any stormwater would have to be managed carefully to make sure that it,
yeah, well, that's where the homes are, the east and west.
Yeah.
Well, that's a major concern for my whole neighborhood.
Also, on the this is Mike Wentz here. On the your proposed facility, one of the elevation drawings shows it being 5 stories tall in certain sections. I understand that you're going for PDH 5, where Brightview was done at PDH 4. But in addition to the dwelling units in here, you have common facilities, dining rooms, entertainment areas, which add to the usage of the floor space. So what is the height of this building with respect to, compatibility next to 1- and 2-story houses, that this is twice as tall, wedged in to existing neighborhoods?
And I'll have to defer to Giff Hampshire for this, because actually with the nomination, we didn't really receive those kinds of details. We didn't receive a whole lot of details as far as height of the building and some of those things, but I think he has more of that information that he's been presenting to the public.
We are really not at the stage where we have elevations yet. We're at a very early stage, but I think if I understand the question correctly, there's no getting away from the fact that this is, whether it's 4 stories or 5 stories, there's no getting away from the fact that it's higher, significantly higher than the existing residential homes, and we certainly understand that. we are going to take that into consideration. One idea that we had was a step down to the north there, I guess it would be, to the back of the site, that the roof would actually step down as it got closer to the houses in the back. That's a concept at this point in time, and one that we would certainly be willing to entertain, and any other ideas. We don't yet have an architect on board. And that's one thing we would do as we get closer, and maybe even during this process. And that architect might have some more ideas about how to mitigate the impact of the mass of this building, whether it's 4 stories or 5 stories, as compared to the existing residential neighborhood.
5 stories
on the high ground.
And I'll get to the next. Yeah, I'll point out that we would get into some of that level of detail with the full plan amendment review, but right now we're just at the stage of determining whether it's worth going to that full plan amendment review process or not. So we're kind of not quite at that level, and then we'd get even more detail at rezoning process. But
okay, can I just end my chat with this plan does not have the support of the Willamette neighborhood en masse. Nobody is in favor of it. It's too big a building. It's too close to our homes. It's going to have a major impact negatively. Okay, thank you.
That's good information. Basically, what we're doing today is gathering that kind of input, gathering all your concerns, and staff hasn't made a recommendation yet. And then who will make the decision is the Planning Commission and the board. So we want to just gather all the information and the comments from the neighborhoods and present that to them. But we should get to the next. Looks like Ben is up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So thanks so much. So I'm a Fairfax County Health Department employee. My wife is also. I just want to take a second to thank the staff for a late night. Know what it takes to do this type of stuff. So thank you very much. We also have a 5-year-old that's in the schools for Fairfax County, and our youngest is in the Employee Child Care Center. So we live and breathe Fairfax. And overall, the sense in our house right now is that we feel very vulnerable. It's not a good place to be in. And we really believe in preparing our children for change. And so we've had conversations with them about that. And so we get questions about, why would somebody want to chop down the trees where the hawks live or where the turtles are at? And those are very hard conversations, but it's our problem as parents to handle those. But what is something that's also our issue is protecting our children. And one thing that we are, there's light pollution, other things that are going to be raised, but we live at 12703 Sebastian Drive. We're on the backside of this property where a lot of this water is going to run. Our property ends up becoming very flat, and we're on well water. Any pollution that comes down that hill is going to end up on our property and going into our soil, where eventually we would be drinking it. On this plan, I don't see anything that's a retention of the water that's going to allow for pollution to be captured and kept uphill. And it's going to significantly, at least in my opinion, because of the way that field is, going to have to be a fairly large water retention, which is not included in this plan. So it's something that I just wanted to kind of bring a live story, that there are young children in this neighborhood, and that pollution, water pollution specifically, because it's not only the initial build, but it's the ongoing build. It's the asphalt that's going to be laid down for sealed year after year to upkeep that facility. That is a very large concern for us. And as a proof point, there are people in our community, including ourselves, that have not paved our driveway because we don't want asphalt and those chemicals coming down into our water. There's also just the gradients of this property. You're going to have to really do a lot of leveling. And on our property and adjacent properties, there are 50-foot trees, and I bet there's a few 75-foot trees. So if you're going to tear out the roots of those trees that extend onto this property, I guarantee you that none of this neighborhood is going to chop down any of our trees on our property. So we now have very large trees looming over this, place where there's vulnerable people in this facility. Seniors are a vulnerable population. We have to protect them. The development plan so far does not protect these residents. And so I'd ask staff to really consider the people in this community about pollution, but also the residents that would be on this property of having potentially very large trees next to them. And this plan definitely needs to be adjusted. However, coming in and saying, no, don't do any of this is not the way that, we should operate. This is a community. And so something that's more closer to Route 29, that kind of gets into this middle space. We have a tendency to develop either single family homes or very, very large mega structures like this one is being proposed. Something smaller, duplexes, something like that would allow for a development of the site that would be more in line with the surrounding community. So I appreciate you taking my comments.
Yeah, it's all good input.
If I could just jump in for just a second, just to make sure that people understand that just as we don't have architectural renderings at this point, we also don't have engineered stormwater facilities. But it's not a matter of choice when we get to that stage. The county will require us under more stringent regulations since 2017 to implement stormwater management controls that achieve a certain water quality and quantity for the stormwater that is leaving the site. There's no choice about it. And whether or not we ever develop the site will depend upon whether or not we can frankly afford to do that under modern standards. So I just want to assure, I'm not saying there won't be any impact. What I'm saying is that there has to be mitigation according to county standards or we can't build it.
Okay, let's move on. We got quite a few hands up. So David White, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, good evening. Just have a few comments I'd like to make more than I have questions at this moment in time, but my name is David White. I live in the Buckley's Reserve community with my wife and 2 kids. It's directly adjacent to the proposed development that we're discussing. And Mr. Hampshire, I also appreciate your presentation. I also know that you were hired on legal counsel, and to be quite frank, I would have greatly appreciated the owners of this facility and what they were trying to do. I wish I would have heard from them instead of you. Just want to throw that out there for maybe the next time. But I'm here tonight to firmly oppose the site-specific plan amendment that would rezone this parcel from its current designation, allowing for 117-unit senior living facility. This proposal is completely out of scale with the surrounding R1 residential zoning and fundamentally incompatible with our neighborhood. Now, let's be clear, this is not a mild adjustment. It's a high-density, multi-story institutional facility being dropped in the middle of a quiet, single-family residential community. It would disrupt the neighborhood's character and set a dangerous precedent for future developments that ignore the integrity of our zoning. Traffic, by the way, is another serious concern. A facility of this size brings daily trips from staff, visitors, deliveries, and emergency responders, which, by the way, are constantly over next door at the Brightwood facility. And while Route 29 is currently being widened, that project was designed using data from 2017 before either this facility or the Brightwood facility was even proposed. So that means the impact of both developments was not accounted for in the traffic models. That is a major planning blind spot. We've also heard no clear justification for placing this facility here. Has formal needs assessment been done? Were other more suitable sites already zoned for this intensity ever seriously considered? That information absolutely needs to be shared with us. And what's more frustrating is I recently learned tonight that the developer did engage outreach, but only with select communities and individuals. No one from Buckley's Reserve was contacted or included, despite the fact that our homes are immediately adjacent to this project site. I'm looking at my home and my deck, and I'm looking at my neighbor's pickup truck parked right outside his driveway. That is not meaningful or equitable community engagement. Us finding out only days ago, that's just checking the box. And finally, it was verbalized by the builders that this building would not take place in this site due to Civil War era railroad tracks or other historical features that might exist on this site. So has a cultural or historical resource assessment being completed? If so, tell me how that report is going to be shared with the public. And if it hasn't been done, is it going to be required before any further approvals move forward? Now, I want to end with this. This is not about opposing senior living. My father just turned 80. My mother turns 80 in August. But it's about responsible land use, inclusive planning, respecting existing neighborhoods. So I'll close by asking a simple question. Supervisor Walkinshaw, if you're still on this call, Commissioner, Mr. Hampshire, Ryan, Michael, would you build your house next to this? Your honest answer is how you should move forward with your plans. Thank you. That's all I have.
Appreciate your comments, and I just want to say I'm sorry you didn't get word of the meeting we had, but we actually contacted Supervisor Harity's office, and through his aide arranged to meet with his Springfield Land Use Committee. That was the entity we were meeting with. That office in turn invited persons from the community. I can't explain why Buckley's Reserve perhaps didn't get notice and Willowsmead did. I don't know, but it wasn't our intent certainly to exclude Buckley's Reserve.
Mr. Hampshire, I appreciate your apology. I don't expect it from you. I expect it from your owners. And I've reached out to Pat, and I look forward to my next cup of coffee with Jeff McKay, where we will talk about this. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Okay, let's keep moving here. We got Justin Littman.
Yeah, hi. I intend to ask for clarification on some of the density, but I think the density was made pretty clear. The intention is to build something like Brightview across the street. And what's really helpful about Brightview is we can see what it actually is. It is a massive facility that's 55 feet tall. Compare that to my house, which is next to this, which is 22 feet tall. I'm trying to understand how putting a facility of that size would be compatible intensity and type, to the surrounding area. If someone could speak to, how that would be considered at all compatible.
I guess Giff could speak to that because we haven't really made a determination along those lines yet, because we're just now seeing it like you guys we're just at the beginning stages. But I'll say, like I said in the presentation, the Brightview ended up, because it has that assisted living component, which is considered accessory and sort of a different use. But if you looked at it all as residential uses, that would be more equivalent to like 28 dwelling units an acre. And this would be, they're asking for about 20 here with the multiplier. So this might be slightly less, but it's in the ballpark of being, in the same sort of scale.
Yeah, I would add, just having been over at Tractor Lane the other day to the closest house to that and looking at the facility, I mean, you have to crane your neck to tell which part is 3 stories and which part is 4 stories. It's just such a massive facility, at its high points and its low points. So.
Right. Well, a lot of the answer depends upon how you frame the question. If the question is the development similar to what's next door to it, it certainly is not. Compatibility, though, in my mind, can exist with mitigation, and that's why we have moved the building as close as possible, Route 29. That's why we have provided as much buffering as possible in this concept. That's why we would consider in architectural renderings things like a step-down roof to make it as compatible as possible. But certainly I have to agree with you, sir, that it's not the same development as next door, and we certainly understand that. We would attempt to mitigate the impacts as much as we possibly could, along the lines of what I just discussed.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and let's keep moving with, we have Wendy Littman, if you're there.
Yes.
Okay.
Here, hang on, turning on my video. Sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to echo many of the points that have been brought up during this call. I do appreciate the fact that you guys listened to the initial comments and that you shifted the building forward. But when I look at this, when I looked at the slide with this, the footprint of this building and the parking lot, and I compare that with what I see from the aerial view with Bright View, there's still quite a difference. There's a lot more footprint here, and they're on similar sized properties, and that concerns me greatly. It feels like it is not at all compatible with, literally being surrounded by the houses in our neighborhood and Buckley's. So I would like to see, again, I also agree that we need more senior living and affordable senior living in our county. But I would like to see that being built so that it is, protecting the existing stable communities and compatible with those communities. This does not feel compatible still. I don't think we're quite there yet. The other point I'd like to make is I am concerned, I guess it's really more of a question. The staff report talked about the site containing the 10 to 20% slopes, and that the need for extensive grading and tree removal would be required to develop the proposed concept on the site. Again, I am one of those houses that is downstream from this. I am greatly concerned about extensive grading and tree removal and what that will do, to both the, my well and drinking water and stormwater runoff and other environmental impacts that it would have. So I would love to hear from how you plan to address challenges like that in a way that might protect the surrounding properties. I'd like to hear that from the applicant, but from the staff too. I'm curious about if this is the sort, the staff report noted these concerns, and I'd love to know how those impacts, how the staff might view that kind of report in terms of this kind of a proposal moving forward.
Yeah, I can comment from the staff perspective. At this point in the process, we haven't done a full staff report. The purpose of the one pager is was my attempt to sort of focus in on these are the real considerations to be thinking about, and these are some challenges that we've identified up front. We're not taking a staff position quite yet on. We wanted to hear from the community and gather all that input before we prejudge it, and then we will be making a recommendation to the PCN board as eventually before May, before they make their decision. But we didn't want to prejudge. But there are obviously challenges that makes it more and more challenging, the topography and all that, to accommodate higher intensity. You can see from the image, you would have to do extensive grading to the entire site. So that's a potential negative of additional density. But we wanted to just highlight the issues that you should be considering and let you guys have your input. If Giff wants to say anything else, we have a couple more speakers too.
I'll just say that, again, similar to my previous answer, we're not going to have any choice about it when we get to both rezoning and site development. County standards are actually pretty restrictive, as anybody who's been through the site plan process knows. And we will have to maintain our stormwater in terms of quantity and quality, prevent erosion, post bonds to prevent erosion, comply with buffering standards, and not only bare minimum buffering standards, but those that are imposed above the minimum standards through the rezoning and special use permit process. So the county is going to make sure that you're protected as much as you can be protected, which is a pretty high standard in my experience.
Okay, so how about Simon? I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name.
Hi, this is Simon Benediz. I'm here with my wife, Sandra, and I just want to say I'm a homeowner that backs up to this proposed facility. I live at 12646 Buckley's Gate Drive, and I just want to say that I think all the major points have been well spoken this evening, and I am totally against this facility. It's way too big for the area, and it doesn't belong in this area. So I just wanted to say that for the record. Sandra, if you have anything else you want to add.
I had one follow-up question. In the Mr. Hampshire, the drawing that you showed about the water runoff and how it's going in multiple directions. And I understand you haven't had an architectural plan nor an engineer, but as someone that has gone through this process in the last 2 years with another property that I went through this area in this neighborhood, in the Buckley's Reserve neighborhood, I know how quickly things can escalate and also how long they can take and how little say that the community really has in the decision-making process. And that is why we are adamant at being heard now. And what I want to know is you have people to the east who don't want their basements and their yards flooded. You have people to the west that don't want that, and they don't want their drinking water poisoned. What? I understand the county has rules. I also know that things happen all the time. What is the mitigation efforts, Mr. Hampshire, when the damage is done?
Yeah, I mean, the conditions in our backyards change all the time. You might be okay for a year, but what about 3-4 years down the road when there are heavier storms that come through and the topography changes, because there are a lot of hills back there, and it's going to be, say it's going to be a challenge, I think is an understatement.
Right, and I have represented folks not like you, but people who have been negatively impacted by developments through erosion and stormwater runoff and that kind of thing. And it is, so I certainly understand your concerns, and they're valid concerns. I'm just not in a position to address them in full right now because we're at a conceptual level. The only thing I can say is, again, that the county has stringent rules for stormwater management, erosion protection, and during the development process also requires bonds of developers to be posted. And those bonds, in order to make sure that the facilities work the way they're supposed to work. And those bonds will sometimes stay in place for years after the development is completed, especially if there's any kind of a complaint by neighbors. I represent one community right now where that's the case, where the development's been completed for many years, but there's still some erosion problems. And so I would encourage you all to remain, as I know you will, vigilant and follow if we ever get to that stage, and we're a long way from it. But if we ever get to that stage, then certainly you'll be right there experiencing any negative impacts, and the county will respond to your complaints to ensure that the bond is not released until such time as the facilities are determined to be working properly. And there is even a process for an amendment of a plan. If the plan that was originally approved was not sufficient, then in some cases the developer can be required to amend that plan to require greater protections. And certainly there's also a political process through your supervisor's office to wage those complaints, and the supervisor's office will sometimes be able to really make a big difference in terms of the vigilance of the staff review of how the facilities are working, whether they're working as they're supposed to work or not.
Yeah, I could add a little context from the staff's perspective. I mean, we do have really good stormwater ordinances when it comes to development, as far as they'll be required to control runoff better than it, or now it's sheet flowing into the neighborhoods, but there's not pavement back there. So it's like, a lot of it's being absorbed by the tree canopy and all that. But the challenge here is that, I mean, normally if you have a existing stormwater, you have a stormwater control system that outlets into a pipe that goes downstream somewhere. You're required to, control like a 15-year storm. And if you get something above that, it overflows into a pipe. But here, there's no apparent overflow point other than, you're constrained with the outflow. So they're most likely be required to over detain to like maybe 100-year level. I'm not exactly sure of the details, but which just means that it would be more expensive on the developer, more cumbersome. They would still be required to do it and meet whatever standards they have to meet. It's just makes it, so from a plan perspective, you know, that's an argument towards over intensifying a site if it's gonna be that constrained and have that many, that many challenges to increase density. But that's not to say that it can't be done. I mean, things can be engineered. So that's just another way to look at it. At the end of the day, they'll be required to manage stormwater. It's just, it'll be particularly challenging on this site because, you know, there's no existing outlet that pipe that it goes to and goes off into Never Land. It just sheet flows into the neighborhoods at this point. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
as maintaining the pond in Buckley's Reserve, you know, I'm very familiar with the runoff and where the water runs to, and those neighbors will be affected eventually too. So thank you for your time. I know it's past time and there's 2 other questions. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. So how about Nazanin?
All right. Hello and good evening. I am an architect. I'm extremely surprised that a project of this magnitude has not hired a civil engineer or an architect to do some basic feasibility study. Architects don't charge much. The feasibility studies run through very quick site profiles, east, west. And as of now, if you do this project, those buildings, those beautiful homes on the east side are going to be flooded. And sure, there are ways to solve those problems. We don't want to go through problems. We want to not start any problems. So I'm very surprised that Fairfax County did not ask for a profile. Michael, you brought it up because you looked at the contour map, which is not accurate. I looked at the contour map of the county and it's not accurate. If you look from Route 29 towards the current existing entrance, you see there is a steep slope that goes towards the entrance. Right there is the beginning of your problem. And then when you go into the site, there's all kinds of hills up and down. And you're sitting on a bit of rocky land. So I'm surprised nobody did any tests for the soils on here. And we have a dab of asbestos possibility. You got to consider all of that. So if I just visually look at the site, I would say I've got 5 acres. If I look at it and subdivide it, I've got 2 acres of it roughly minus building, 2 acres of it asphalt. Michael, just off the bat, that's going to mean automatic problem with drainage. Automatic problem with drainage. That's not even considering the slope of the site. So, Michael, this is like a headache for the county, a headache for all the people east of this place. We're on the west side of it. I really feel very sad for those 1 million dollar homes on the east of this building. And I'm very surprised that the supervisor okayed this. I'm very surprised that no feasibility studies are shared at this stage. This is the stage you will share feasibility studies. Feasibility studies require extensive research and give us specific data and information why this particular neighborhood, you identify this as a suburban neighborhood, this particular suburban neighborhood requires and needs this specific function at this level of density. At this level of density. It just seems like it's hogwashed into some verbiage, and the numbers start with 2 per acre, go 1.4 per acre, and right before we know it, you do some calculations, we get to 40s, and then before you know it, those 40s end up 117, and there's this vague verbiage that says, oh, by the way, if we do housing that's affordable, that's going to be 117 plus. And I go, what? And all of that is done without any feasibility study. I am angry. I am angry because there was another angry person here, but I'm just looking at it.
Well, just to ease your concerns a bit, I'll just clarify, nothing has been sort of bought off on at this point. The only thing that's been determined, that's why we have this process, is the only thing that's been determined is if this met the requirements to submit a nomination. So that's where we're at.
Do me a favor, Michael. Do me a favor. Include us in all of the process steps of the staff report before this goes into any next step. So
that's exactly what we're doing at this, and that's actually the reason for this process. Because before, as of 10 years ago, we would staff and the supervisors would largely make some of these determinations on whether to authorize a plan amendment, and then it was felt like there wasn't enough community input at the early stages. So that's the entire reason for this SSPA process, is to come to the community at the very onset. But it gets a little confusing because then the folks don't have the kind of details that they want. But,
so Michael, anyway, you now know that Ava, who speaks on our behalf, is very detail oriented. We've got people who are professional, who know about these things, have been working for the county for many years, and we're very familiar with this process. So we love for you to include us at each step, and not this process of this proposal get any further without our direct input and without every bit of it being reported back to us. We would love for this proposal to be taken much more seriously without just giving a roof plan and a site plan and expect us to say, okay, we wait until the next step. We will not wait until the next step. We want this process to be shared with us, and nothing goes into the next step until more information. Feasibility studies are extensively done for this very dense proposal, which is not consistent with existing conditions.
We're on the same page there, because that's where we're determining through this screening process is whether we even get to the next stage. And if we do, then there will be a higher level of feasibility and other things done, but we're just trying to determine whether we should even get to that point or not, or just, so anyway, so we do hear you, and I appreciate your comments.
We thank you on the western side, and I think the eastern side is now awake, and they're going to thank you as well. We hope that we have this wonderful neighborhood where we won't have any problems of drainage to then follow up. And there are problems of clean water happening that has become issues with the county, with the supervisors. We just like to live in peace. And thank you for your work, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your input. And
I just
Justin?
jump in. Ma'am, I just
Okay,
want to jump in to say that we do have a civil engineer on the project. Walter Phillips, very good engineering firm. Monica Hawkins is on the line as well. It's just that the engineer at this stage, when we're only talking about consistency with the comprehensive plan or whether there should be a comprehensive plan amendment, we haven't gotten into engineering details or feasibility studies at this point in time.
Okay, Justin, you have another comment?
No, I actually have a question for you.
Question.
Okay, so my question is also about feasibility. At what point in this process is the feasibility of the conceptual plan taken into consideration? So for example, this conceptual plan, while moving things further away from some parts of the neighborhood, puts a very large building right on Route 29. Is that something the county would find acceptable? Or it shows the entrance going through a building? Is that something the county would find feasible? So at what point in the process is it determined that the conceptual plan that's been provided is actually feasible?
So at this point, we're considering the scale, because this is about the sort of request for the density increase. So we're considering whether the request to increase the density to that level of scale is worthy of further study as a plan amendment. And then if it did make it to the plan amendment, we would get more into the details of what you're talking about at that point. But so we're kind of one step before that, whether or not we should even consider it, because they could pursue a smaller scale independent living under the current plan, and then they would still have to come to the community with the details for that, whatever rezoning they require and special exception, but that would be outside of the plan amendment process. So the question here is whether we should consider a plan amendment for the increased scale. So that's the first question. That's where we're at now. And we, like I said, we haven't taken a position quite yet, staff, on it. We will in the next few weeks before the board decision on whether to move it forward or not. But we wanted to gather the input, and so it's a process. And like I said, it's a little frustrating, I think, for folks to not have all the details up front. But the point is that we're trying to include the community at the very onset before, but it hasn't even been decided whether or not we are ever even getting to the level of considering a plan amendment or not. This is sort of that entry doorway, to even get there. So
yeah, I hear you. My concern is that there's no feasible way to build a facility of this size on that land, and so I just
okay. Yeah, so that's the input we need to hear today. So that's great.
Thank
and then I don't know if Graham or Ryan, I haven't kept up with the chat. If there's anything, there's no more hands up. I don't know if there's anything in the chat that needs to be
I think
addressed.
I just wanted to reiterate one thing that Mike said, because it applies, I think, also to Nazanin and as well as to Ben's comments earlier, which is we do kind of 2 levels of impact review. So if this nomination does advance for further review, and that's the only question that's currently pending, right, is whether we should study something further or not. We do a comprehensive plan impact analysis, and so that at that point we would be looking at if this is supportable, we think that there's a way to make it compatible. We would be looking at appropriate building heights. We would be looking at planned transportation improvements. We would also be looking at tree save and buffering, landscaping, those kinds of things. Stormwater being kind of a little bit more of a technical piece. We have policy guidance about stormwater. But that is often something that we also need to look at with the rezoning, just given the level of detail and engineering that's typically required. But we absolutely do look at the impacts of all the nominations if they advance for further review. So just want to make sure that people know, like, this is really just to look at the initial concept and understand whether the community has, big picture concerns with the nomination, just given what we're seeing. And I think we've heard a lot from the community tonight and really appreciate those comments. So thank you all. I just wanted to say thank you for all your comments, because this is the kind of feedback that we need. And I would agree with Mike that sometimes it is frustrating not having all this information up front. There's no good way to get that information all the way up front without without basically having the nominator spend a lot of money early on without knowing whether they're going to advance for further review or not. So really get it, really appreciate it, and this is exactly the kind of feedback that we need. So I just want to thank you.
Okay, Nazanin, do you have another question?
Forgive me. I just want to repeat what Justin said earlier. So, and Wendy as well said it. If you've ever lived close to an area with willow trees, they're tall, and the way they kind of behave is every now and then something from the top just falls right down. We're used to it, and we don't mind it. These tall branches coming down, and from time to time, they fall right over our roof or our cars or our driveway. We stand for that because we love these trees. We recognize it. To the west of this property, there's a whole row of these beautiful willow trees. And right there, there's a huge drop. And if you look at the immediate property to the west of this property, where I think there is that halfway home, there's a huge retaining wall. That shows the topo issues that this project is going to deal with. And as soon as they start working on this, some of those willow trees are going to be gone. And if they stay, as it was explained later, I think it was Wendy who explained it, those people are going to be vulnerable. They're going to be endangered by these willow trees falling off. And then there are these old people who don't know how to handle that. I mean, it's just, we know when we get this, we have 1 acre of this thing. We keep our homes far away from some of these willows, and the ones that are there, we watch those branches. We clean those branches regularly. Every year, Justin just hires somebody to clean his willow trees. Okay. And we watch after it. If one of those branches fall, we go, hey guys, watch when you walk along here. But you know, that kind of neighborhood communication and collaboration is not going to be with this new place. I really would like you guys to do it. But if as you do your expand your study, I'm really surprised. They hired an engineer. They didn't do a profile study. And honestly, an architect or a civil engineer would not have charged a whole lot to just do a quick profile study. In fact, Michael and Graham, I did a quick massing study for our neighbors with the 4 stories and then did a site model, even with the county contour lines, which is not accurate. And I'd be happy to share it with you. And I did it with 4 stories, and 5 stories is going to be really, really difficult. And you can't put lipstick on a pig and say, oh, it's a model. You know, you can't put a gable roof on top of a ginormous building and say, oh, you know, now it's compatible, you know. And I'm offended by that kind of comment. And I wish that this project was not presented by a lawyer, an attorney. It was presented by an architect, urban designer, an engineer. So that's what I would hope, that the county from now on perhaps put it as part of a request that these projects would be a little bit more elaborate in their presentations as they're going for this stage, not even next stage, to have a whole lot more information so we can respond and we can even tell them. I mean, it's to their benefit to do the feasibility study, to recognize all the problems that this project is going to have now and further down, with all the buildings that are going to be on the east side of this are going to be flooded. I can guarantee you that. Right there, you have a slope, which is more than 30% slope. Right there, you're going to have some major problem with water runoff, and you're going to have stability of the soil. I know Fairfax County site inspection focuses on that, but they're going to have a hard time dealing with that. No matter what they do on that site, unless they build ginormous retaining walls, it's not going to happen. So I hope you include that. I apologize, keep going on. And I thank you for making me feel better.
No,
Thank you
yeah,
for
it's
your
fine.
hard work.
Yeah, we definitely do get to that kind of analysis at some point in the process. It's up to the nominators how much they want to do up front, and that's sort of the nature of the process. But I hear you on that.
And Nazanin, if you don't mind, do send us the profile that you put together. We would be curious
Oh,
to take a
my
look.
pleasure. It's not accurate, but I'd be more than glad to share that with you. Okay. And I'll be more than happy to be part of the process, because I heard that at some point with the previous project, architectural style was part of the process of decision making. That's a very subjective thing. And I'm always concerned when such subjective issues are being reviewed by people who are not necessarily stakeholders. And I'd be more than happy to participate in that process as well. I share the model that I made. It's a preliminary model to have a feeling of how much is it going to impact our site. I'll be happy to share that.
I guess I can put my email in the chat if you guys want to.
Sure, I'll be happy to. I did a
like
Revit solid model. I shared my PowerPoint with Ava, but I'm going to do another one, and I'll be more than happy to.
You're talking to the right guy. I do 3D modeling myself, so it's Graham.
All right. Well, as long as Ava has your email, I'm good. I'm going to communicate through Ava because she's our leader. Thank you.
Sure. Yep. I think that's all we have for hands up, unless there's anything in the chat that needs to be addressed, or if Gif has anything you want to say.
No, I'm good. I appreciate everybody's time and attention.
Yeah, we're kind of running late.
And your good comments as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, everyone, since I know we're running kind of late, I think maybe we ought to go ahead and wrap this up. I just want to cover some last minute steps here before we say goodbye to everybody tonight. But we've gotten a lot of questions in the chat about, what happens next, where can we get involved, how do we provide further input? And so I just wanted to just share with you some resources as far as we've got a site called Public Input. That's a survey that we're doing for the community. We've got the email address that I shared earlier, the DPD SSPA at Fairfax County. That's a great address. We have our project website as well. And so all of these are avenues and ways that you can get more information and get involved. This meeting is recorded. There will be a video and a chat transcript available, and that will be posted to the SSPA website that you can see there for the meeting. And certainly that will be up here in the next day, maybe 2 days, by the end of the week or so. There are some opportunities here for upcoming planning commission workshops that I want to call your attention to. These are tentative dates, and we don't yet know which nomination will be going with which date just yet. We're still finalizing the agenda, but you can see these are on May 1st, May 15th, the 22nd, and the 5th. And if there are any changes to that schedule, we'll update our website with that. I'd also, in the chat, I noted that Supervisor Walkinshaw's office in the Braddock District has offered to field comments on nominations or SSPA matters in general for the StorageMart application. They're at Braddock at fairfaxcounty.gov, Braddock at fairfaxcounty.gov. And then also at Supervisor Harity's office in the Springfield District, the address that we have for them is Supervisor Harity's land use planner, and her name is Meredith Martinez. And we can put that in the chat, and that's at fairfaxcounty.gov. And so, of course, in addition to reaching out to staff, the supervisors' offices are happy to address any questions or comments you might have as well. That's where we are tonight. Again, I think that this has really been a great conversation for us. We've heard a lot of excellent feedback. This is exactly the type of thing that we want to hear at this phase in the process. And I really appreciate the thoughtful discussion and the thoughtful comments that have come forward tonight. Again, if anybody has any questions or comments after the fact, please feel free to reach out to us. And we greatly appreciate this opportunity to meet with the community, and we really look forward to working with you going forward. I'm going to stay on the line here for a few minutes, just maybe 5 minutes or so, to answer any last-minute questions. But I just wanted to, again, say thank you, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you. We'll be involved in the next steps. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All have been wonderful. That's why we have zoning. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
People are leaving, so you probably.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, we do have a few people leaving, which is just great. Everybody's had a very long evening, but of course it's been a productive evening as well. So.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Mr. Stewart. I missed they were talking about boring stuff, so I left for a while. Thank you so much.
Rep.
I appreciate all your help.
I appreciate all of your comments tonight too. I think that
let me put my camera on. That's very rude if I don't. Okay. I appreciate all your help. I understand you're doing these things, but my concern is like a magician. They're showing the hat, hiding the rabbit under the table. The very same people, they're gonna, after you rezone them to industrial, then all the category, if I could put just something here, you could see what the industrial allows them. Flex building, warehousing, storage by right, but they're permitted. Can I put that up? We can see the zoning here somehow.
I don't have that slide anymore, but I
have it. Can I share the window with you?
I'm not able to share slides except for my own. That's why we asked to paste in the chat. You can email me the slides. That'd be great.
Let me see if I can attach it here. Hold on. Let me see if I can attach it here.
Okay. Yeah. If you can put it in
Give
the chat.
me a second.
Yeah. But I just want to reiterate that, even, if we're at the stage with this StorageMart, where it's an idea at this point, and we have a lot of
they're not
evaluation to do in
here.
terms of planning and zoning and what might be possible. So, I mean,
Okay.
we're nowhere
See-
near addressing some of the level of detail where I know your concern is, and they are valid concerns.
It's
I do
not
wanna
my
acknowledge.
concern. They're playing games here. The whole purpose is rezoning to industrial. They will get rid of all the special exception condition automatically. So and then they're going to say we're going to rent those, they rent it as flex, and then they're going to say you put in our contractor in danger. They're going to close the travel lane. Says, hey, this is dangerous. You have to close this up. Now we are in the zone industrial, and then they're going to get rid of all the special exception rules once the rezoning take place. Don't you get it? What they're doing?
Well, you know, in terms of
intention is not really
zoning, some of
expansion.
those things may need to be renegotiated, but it would be, you know, in the terms of a public process where you'd be able to weigh in, you'd be able to provide comments. We would negotiate all of that, you know,
Do a feasibility
transparent
study.
way, so.
I studied engineering when I went to college. I worked with studying engineering. Okay, I was going to build highways and all that, and things happened. It's a long story. So feasibility study, the way they're doing it, little square footage, they're going to get the cost. They don't get returned in 200 years. So they're using that as a distraction. We're going to extend. They really want rezoning. That's what they want. So they be permitted by right to do anything they want on that land. Right now, that overlay of this Fairfax Center, it's called for retail store and high-end places. It's not like Chantilly, Willard Road, or Lockport, or Telegraph Road Industrial Center. So what they want is rezoning. Once they get rezoning, they will come back and sue you for putting in their contractor in danger because of that travel lane. So you have to close the travel lane. They block the service road to million Fairfax County's residents. They'll take away rights from not only me. Paragraph 6 of a special exception protects me. I have a right of way. Even they close it, they're not going to close it on me. It says in the paragraph 6 of a special exception. But for million other people, Fairfax County residents, they're going to take that right away. They have the right to use that travel lane and service road.
No, I don't think that there's any
game.
intent on behalf of the county to change any right of way or things of that nature. You know, I would imagine that would stay open, you know, for the future. So
Listen,
you know, I'm not really sure. We'd have to look at that in greater detail at the rezoning level, of course.
Well, I have it all documented here. I can give it to you. Maybe I should come and see you. You seem to be a very nice guy. I like you. I had a different image of you. I like you.
Well, I'm helping you as best I can. So I mean, we're trying to get you the information that you need. So.
I'm a good judge of character. I've dealt with tens of thousands of people since age 19 when I came here. So I've done everything you can imagine. I've been in your home. I've been your neighbor's home. I know guys like you. You're very neat, nice. You take care of the house and everything. You follow the rules. You don't break laws. You're that type of guy. Clean straight shooter. But what it is I can read people. You seem to be a very nice gentleman. Anyhow, but these people, they are using that extension as distraction to get the zoning. They have no intention of extending it because it doesn't make economical sense. All that grading of the storm water field, moving the building, where they're going to go? They make it right turn on the tunnel and fall in the pond. How are you going to access that extension? Right now, they have a drive-through tunnels making to the left 1 degree coming out of Service Road Highway. How are they going to make a right turn and where do they go? To make a U-turn, they back in. How do they carry to the storage area? They're not interested in this. This is a shiny object, distract you. They want something. They hide the rabbit under the table. They're not interested in that at all. Later, they're going to say, "Oh, we changed our mind. We're going to make parking lot over there for contractors." Later, they're going to close the travel lane because you're endangering our contract. After they get the rezoning, there by right they can have it as a flex building. So they will get 5 zoning on that one building. Right now, as we speak, Century Kitchen and Bath Google, the Century Bath and Kitchen, they renting it as retail as we speak right now. Century, I wish I could show you. I can't. But Google Century Kitchen on Google their address, zoom in from Google Earth, zoom in, you see Century Kitchen. It has hours open on weekends too. They're renting it as retail. So they have retail zoning, they have industrial zoning, they have special exception, self-storage zoning. The other one comes right by right. The other zoning comes by right if they're zone industrial. And where in the corner of Fairfax City, Fairfax Center, and Lee Highway, right? Become an eyesore there. This is criminal. What they're asking is criminal. It should have been rejected right off the bat. It should have been even accepted. The fact and the letter of justification doesn't mention anything about rezoning. They keep in 5. Read the letter of condition. There's 4 paragraphs. 5 times they mention corner of Lee Highway and Shelley Ghetto. They're obsessed with that. They're allergic to that. Because for 17 years, they got a lot of illicit, illegal money. They got high on that. They got addicted to that. Now it's taken away. They want it back. That illegal money, Fairfax County should have confiscated the building for punishment. If somebody sells a drug and they get illicit money from sale of that drug, if it's a car, they take the car. If it's a house, they take the house. So they profited for 17 years from their illegal activity, which they shouldn't have. The previous owner did it by the rule. Kept the place beautifully. I have the pictures and everything. I used to travel that every day when I was going to submit my own sub plan, my own site plan. And these people just.
So I do want to, I don't mean to cut you off. All of this is good conversation, of course, but we are still in the public meeting here, and I would like to. There are a few others on the call, so I want to make sure I cover all the questions. Well, there are a few others on the call, but we can continue the conversation outside of the public meeting if you like.
Okay. Well, all right, that would be good. But don't get distracted. Don't let them deceive you like they deceived Fairfax County and blocked the public service road for 12 years. And they rented as a flex instead of storage. Now they got addicted to that money. They got that high. They're sitting in Missouri, putting their boots on and say, it's how we fool Fairfax County. And they laugh at you guys. I'm a businessman. I know how they think. So don't be fooled by their action. I'm just saying, extension is a distraction. Later, they're going to say, we want to make that, since now we have the zoning, we're going to make that parking lot for the contractors. Thank you, Mr. Suar. I appreciate the opportunity you gave me. Thank you so much. You seem
and I appreciate
like
your comments this evening. We'll be in touch about those issues. So
this is my first time
thank you very much.
ever. My employees used to come see me, or I faced on them on job site. Never been on Zoom. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir, and have a good evening.
Have a good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes. I know we've got a few others on the call this evening. Are there any other questions that we can answer, whether it's policy or nomination related? I just want to make sure everyone gets a last chance here before we call it an evening.
Can I leave now?
Yes, you're able to leave.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Swan. Have a nice day. Thank you. I appreciate all your help.
And we'll go ahead and we'll call this an evening. But thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone's participation, and we'll be in touch soon with the next steps on the project.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you.